is an attack on all of us.
It's Representative Paul Ryan, House Speaker, speaking. The House just now convened, and he named the names of those injured and shot. It's 20 after 9 Pacific time, June 14th, 2017, Wednesday. Less than an hour after a shooting in Virginia, where the majority whip was shot and injured, and he will recover.
I know we want to give our thanks to the first responders and to the Alexandria Police Department who were on the scene in minutes. And I know this House wants to state unequivocally that we are, as ever, awed by the tremendous bravery of the Capitol Police.
The House Speaker seems shaken up as he's speaking, holding back tears.
I spoke with Special Agent Bailey and Special Agent Griner this morning. One was being treated and one was about to go into surgery. I expressed our profound gratitude to them. It is clear to me, based on various eyewitness accounts, that without these two heroes, Agent Bailey and Agent Griner, many lives would have been lost. I know that we all want to learn as much as we can about what happened. We just all received a briefing from the Sergeant of Arms. I have complete confidence in the investigation that's being conducted by the Capitol Police, the FBI, who are also working with local law enforcement. I know we want to extend our gratitude for the outpouring of support that we've received from throughout the Capitol and from throughout the country. And now, knowing Steve Scalise as we all do, he is likely really frustrated that he's not going to be able to play in the baseball game. I also know that Steve wants all of us to commend the bravery of those who came to the aid of the wounded. In the coming days, we will hear their stories, and we will have the chance to hold up their heroism. My colleagues, there are so many memories from this day that we will want to forget, and there are so many images that we will not want to see again. But there is one image in particular that this House should keep. And that is a photo I saw this morning of our Democratic colleagues gathered in prayer this morning after hearing the news. You know, every day we come here to test and to challenge each other. We feel so deeply about the things that we fight for and the things that we believe in. At times, our emotions can clearly get the best of us. We're all imperfect. But we do not shed our humanity when we enter this chamber. For all the noise and all the fury, we are one family. These were our brothers and sisters in the line of fire. These were our brothers and sisters who ran into danger and saved countless lives. So before this House returns to its business, let's just slow down and reflect. To think about how we're all being tested right now. Because we are being tested right now. I ask each of you to join me, to resolve, to come together, to lift each other up, and to show the country, to show the world, that we are one house, the people's house, united in our humanity. It is that humanity which will win the day, and it always will. God bless. I yield.
I rise to join the distinguished speaker in paying tribute to the brave men and women of the Capitol Police Force, and also in sadness for the assault that was made on our colleagues and members of the staff. To my colleagues, you're going to hear me say something you've never heard me say before. I identify myself with the remarks of the speaker. They are beautiful remarks, Mr. Speaker. Thank you so much. For the sentiments that they represent, thank you so much. Again, we are not one caucus or the other in this House today, but we speak for each other in saying that we send our thoughts and prayers to our colleague, Steve Scalise. Personally, we have our Italian-American connection, so as soon as I heard his name, I was filled with concern, as I would be for anyone here, but we have that special connection, so our hopes and prayers, and I said to the speaker, I'll be asking you every 5 minutes, how is Steve coming along? And also for Zach Barth in Congressman Roger Williams' office, Matt Micah, who was a former staffer, and of course, as the speaker acknowledged, Crystal Griner and David Bailey. In acknowledging their sacrifice and how fortunate we all were that they were on the scene, because other lives would have probably been lost, I want us to remember that every single day the Capitol Police protects all of us, takes risk for us, and while a day like this is a time where we can focus on it, so sadly, it doesn't mean that other days aren't as challenging. And I especially want to call attention to Detective John Gibson and Officer Jacob Chestnut, who almost 19 years ago, 1988 it was, in July, lost their lives protecting the Congress, the Capitol. And not just the members of Congress, the staff, the press, and our visitors, people who come to see this Capitol, this great edifice to democracy known throughout the world. So they are protecting a great deal. And it is an attraction. And that makes it all the more risky. You may not know this, my colleagues, but every time I pray, which is very frequently, and certainly every Sunday, I pray for all of you together. In the earlier years, I used to pray for your happiness, for the fact that we would, working together, heed the words of President Kennedy in the closing of his inaugural address when he said, "May God's work must truly be our own." How do we view what God's will is for us? How do we come together to give confidence to the American people that, as our founders intended, we would have our disagreements and we would debate them and we would have confidence in our beliefs and humility to listen to others. But in more recent years, I have been praying not only for that, but for our safety. As I, above anyone in here, and I can say that quite clearly, have been probably the target of more, I'm the political target and therefore the target of more threats than anyone, perhaps other than the President of the United States, Barack Obama. And so I prayed for Barack Obama. And now I continue to pray for him. And I pray for Donald Trump, that his presidency will be successful and that his family will be safe. Because it is about family. We are called for a purpose to this body. It's a great thing. And we know what it means to each of us to serve, and we recognize that in others. And we also recognize that you have your constituents, we have ours, and we respect you and your constituents who sent you here. All worthy of respect. But we do have our differences. And so I pray, my prayer is that we can resolve our differences in a way that furthers the preamble to the Constitution, takes us closer to e pluribus unum. And today, again, it's in the family. It's an injury in the family for the staff and for our colleague and for his leadership. As I mentioned just a minute ago in the Fuller thing, sports are a wonderful thing in our country. Probably one of the most unified. I think the arts, we like to say music or plays or whatever, but sports really bring us together in our cities. You see people who have the biggest differences of opinion on politics, and yet when their team is on the field, people come together. People come together. So when this team was on the field practicing with such camaraderie and such brotherhood, I don't know if you have any sisters on your team. We have two on our team. For this person to take this action was so cowardly. So cowardly. We'll learn more about motivation and the rest of that. But it seems particularly sad, although any violent death, of course, is sad, but particularly sad that at a time when people want us to come together, and we're prepared to come together tomorrow night, that this assault would be made. But we cannot let that be a victory for the assailant or anyone who would think that way. So tomorrow we'll go out on the field, we'll root for our team, we'll want everyone to do his or her very best, and we will use this occasion as one that brings us together and not separates us further. And with that, again, I want to thank the speaker for bringing us together, and again, with endless gratitude to our Capitol Police, in particular today, of course, Crystal Griner, David Bailey, but never out of our prayers, Detective John Gibson and Officer Jacob Chestnut. Thank you, my colleagues, for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you on this sad day. Steve and others, you are deeply in our prayers. We count the minutes until you return. Please convey that to him, Mr. Speaker. Thank you all.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate.
Just heard the House Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi. Before that, the Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, both delivering quite emotional remarks here in the House of Representatives, paying their best wishes to one of their colleagues, the Republican whip Steve Scalise, who is in a hospital, had surgery today after being shot in the hip at a baseball practice this morning, also paying their tributes, best wishes and prayers to the other shots, including two Capitol Police officers, a Congressional aide as well. Very emotional remarks to the Speaker, saying he was horrified, that everyone was horrified, hoping, he said, that this becomes a unifying moment in a town that is frankly on an hourly basis, if not a minute-by-minute basis, divided by polarized politics. The Speaker talking about the one family and talking about the heroes, not only the first responders, but the people in that neighborhood just a few miles from the nation's capital who came out of their apartment buildings, came out of their homes, and helped those scrambling from the baseball field this morning as the shooter opened fire. With me now, CNN Senior Congressional Correspondent Manu Raju, CNN Senior Washington Correspondent Brianna Keeler, and our Political Director David Chalian. Manu, I want to start with you first. This is not a day about politics, and I don't want to get too into politics. This is a day to have prayers for those who were shot. It is a day to track the investigation, which at the outset does seem to have some political motivation. But what we just saw there, a shocked Washington taking a moment to reflect. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, that's right. And I have not seen this level of unity between the two sides probably since one of the last tragedies, say 9/11. Remember when they came out in the steps of the Capitol, John, and united both sides, try to show some unity here. This is a real rare moment here on Capitol Hill to see both leaders express their concern and try to show that they're all standing together in this fight. But I can tell you, John, in talking to a number of members this morning, people are deeply rattled by this. They know that this could happen this could happen to almost any of them. A lot of them do not have security. Only the members of the immediate leadership team walk around with security detail, and that's one reason why, of course, that these members who were practicing in the baseball diamond today were stayed safe, because Steve Scalise, a member of that Republican leadership team, had a security detail there, and they protected most of the members who were still, and staff who were on site. Members realized that this could happen to them. They were sat down in this this closed-door briefing right before they went to the floor, John, and they were talking about how to increase their own personal security at their own events, whether there should be more security, whether there should be more resources. A lot of people really rattled this moment, and one reason why the folks for the moment, John, putting down their partisan swords and hoping to come together, at least for now, as they try to move past this very shocking situation on Capitol Hill.
And Brianna, come in on that point, because I've watched you roaming the halls, talking to members of Congress, talking to some of their staff members, talking to some of the congressmen who were there at the baseball field this morning as this horror unfolded. It is a shock to the system, and we'll see where it takes us from here.
It is, and you could see it in their eyes. I will tell you that, John, just talking to a couple of Congressman Rodney Davis, one of them, they came straight to Statuary Hall from this event, and just, you could still just see how much they were in shock. And I think one of the things they were also communicating was that this is a pure sport, right? This is a pure thing that they're doing for the love of the game, to help out charity. It's a baseball event. It's bipartisan. And for how much rancor you may see in Washington, and how much division and people lamenting that Democrats and Republicans don't get along anymore, this is one of these displays where for months these members of Congress practice, and this is what goes on the men's team as well as for the women's game, which is to take place next week. And they have this moment to get to know each other in a way that doesn't have anything to do with policy. It has to do with finding common ground. So I think that they are united now, certainly in their concerns about security. This was the Republican practice, but Democrats are certainly with the Republicans on this, and they feel like this could have just as easily have happened to them. And we've even been seeing some moments of just outpouring, bipartisan outpouring of support, whether it's the hugs that we're seeing between members, or for instance, we saw a Democratic member of the House of Representatives who, with his staff, was carrying bags of sandwiches over to Steve Scalise's office. The office of the Majority Whip is actually right over here across from Statuary Hall, and we asked them, are you trying to feed...
All right, folks, thank you for joining me on the Michael Tobin Show. And as you most likely know by now, Congressman Scalise, House Majority Whip, was shot about an hour ago at a baseball practice. They were practicing for a game that was to be playing tomorrow, and they've disclosed that they will still play tomorrow. And he's going to survive. And shortly after the shooting, President Donald Trump gave some remarks, and at the end of his remarks, he disclosed that the shooter is dead and had been the fifth person transported to the hospital. So President Trump had actually disclosed during his statements that the gunman is dead. And from a Reuters article, the first thing that I read before turning on the television, Representative Mo Brooks of Alabama was there, and he said the shooter said nothing during the rampage. And he continued, but for the Capitol Police and the heroism they showed, it could very well have been a large-scale massacre. All we would have had would have been baseball bats versus a rifle. Those are not good odds. And that is what Representative Mo Brooks said. And I just played for you the opening of Congress with some opening remarks. And I provided from CNN only because I wanted to see what the dialogue was. So right now, of course, this is such short notice, they don't really have excellent talking points, but they are talking about feelings and people's emotions after the attack. But right now it is 9:40. Give it a few minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and keep it going. I may change the channel. I'm going to see if Fox News still has Congress speaking or not, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it on CNN because, of course, they're gathering their talking points. And if you're listening right now, I just want to provide for you what the immediate reactions are, because we could all do our own research after any of these types of events, whether it be terror attacks or violence or what have you, and get some very good quality material for news and events. But I'm only showing providing from CNN just to see who's going to be the first to talk about gun control. There, I said it. Okay, it's a commercial right now, so I'm going to go ahead and find Fox News. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and replay President Trump's remarks. I have it right here. Here it comes. Sorry about the delay. Here it is.
As you all know, shortly after 7 a.m. this morning, a gunman opened fire on members of Congress and their staffs as they were practicing for tomorrow's annual charity baseball game. Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. If not for the heroic actions of the two Capitol Police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. Melania and I are grateful for their heroism and praying for the swift recovery of all victims. Congressman Scalise is a friend, and a very good friend. He's a patriot, and he's a fighter. He will recover from this assault. And Steve, I want you to know that you have the prayers not only of the entire city behind you, but of an entire nation and, frankly, the entire world. America is praying for you, and America is praying for all of the victims of this terrible shooting. I spoke with Steve's wife, Jennifer, and I pledged to her our full and absolute support. Anything she needs, we're with her and with the entire Scalise family. I have also spoken with Chief Matthew Verderosa. He's doing a fantastic job, of the Capitol Police, to express our sympathies for his wounded officers and to express my admiration for their courage. Our brave Capitol Police perform a challenging job with incredible skill, and their sacrifice makes democracy possible. We also commend the brave first responders from Alexandria Police, Fire and Rescue, who rushed to the scene. Everyone on that field is a public servant. Our courageous police, our congressional aides, who work so tirelessly behind the scenes with enormous represent our people. We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country. We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans, that our children deserve to grow up in a nation of safety and peace, and that we are strongest when we are unified and when we work together for the common good. Please take a moment today to cherish those you love and always remember those who serve and keep us safe. God bless them all. God bless you. And God bless America. Thank you.
Okay, folks, that was a repeat of President Trump's remarks. And I want to take you back to CNN and Bernie Sanders is speaking.
The Capitol Police for their heroic actions to prevent further harm.
Now, John, our colleague Jeff Zeleny did speak to the person who is in charge of Bernie Sanders' Iowa campaign operation, Robert Becker, who told Jeff that nobody has any recollection of James Hodgkinson, of course, the man who was shot the members of Congress and opened fire during these baseball practice. According to Becker, the Bernie Sanders campaign aide, nobody has any recollection of Hodgkinson. He's not anybody anyone can remember. That's the quote that he gave Jeff Zeleny. They said there were more than 10,000 volunteers at the time. They said he was not a paid volunteer, but clearly important enough for Bernie Sanders, he believed, to come out and condemn these acts and to make it clear that he'd been told this morning that the shooter was in fact someone who did volunteer on the campaign, John.
Anna Roger bringing us that. It's a strong statement, condemnation by Senator Sanders as we continue to learn more and more about the shooter today. Manu, thank you. Here's a little bit more on those who were shot today and their condition. Representative Steve Scalise is undergoing surgery. He's listed in stable condition according to a statement.
Continue listening, folks. It's 9:48, 12:48 Eastern Time, and just 12 more minutes to go as developments just happened that the shooter happened to have been a campaign volunteer. So you're getting the tail end of this hour's news, and at the beginning of the next hour, it's going to be groundbreaking. So please stay tuned, folks.
Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Doctor, number one, it appears at this moment, no life-threatening injuries here. I just want you to think of your experience as a trauma surgeon. As you're on a baseball field, somebody comes in with a rifle. By the witness accounts, first they heard one shot, and then all of a sudden, rat-a-tat-a-tat. Describe the trauma conditions, the concerns at that moment.
Well, you know, there's two things that are sort of going on simultaneously. You want to care for the injured, but at the same time, when there's still somebody who's shooting, you obviously are balancing that with your own well-being. So that was happening. It sounded like at the time pretty dramatic sort of descriptions of going over to people, trying to do basic care, stopping bleeding, applying pressure, applying tourniquets, and that sort of thing. That's really, you know, some of the more important things you can do in a situation like that. We know, I haven't heard the full descriptions of the other injured. We know with Congressman Scalise that he was shot in the hip. We know if there's anything good about this, there's no vital organs in that area, which is why it wasn't surprising that he was able to be awake, even making a phone call. But it's still a pretty significant injury, and it's described as a rifle injury, John, and the sort of significance of that is that means it was a very high velocity, probably, injury, and that's what doctors, the medical teams, the trauma teams are thinking about. A high velocity injury like that, you have to anticipate what sort of damage, what sort of injury that's going to inflict on the body Are there blood vessels in particular that have been damaged? Because that's what can be life-threatening, and that's why he goes to surgery. But at those few moments, John, balancing first responder with still trying to be as safe as you can simultaneously is pretty much what they're thinking about.
And Sanjay, you mentioned it, obviously, it's almost a perverse question, but if you're going to be shot, being shot in the hip is preferable to being shot in many other places. If you come to a victim as such, I assume your first thing is, does this appear to be life-threatening? But after that, when you're talking about a gunshot wound, what would the first responders' concerns be? Let's play that out.
Well, in all trauma situations, there's actually a very simple sort of way that the people approach it. It's literally ABC. You want to make sure the airway is open. You want to make sure the person is breathing. And then C stands for circulation, which is basically trying to control blood loss. Those are the big things that one can do in the most immediate situation under these circumstances. Again, where you may be shot at yourself in that sort of situation. So really, you heard about one of the other congressmen, I believe, applying a tourniquet. Good idea. One of the big arteries, the femoral artery, is in that area. You want to apply pressure to the wound itself because of potential bleeding there. You know that he's talking, so his airway is open, he's breathing on his own, so really focusing on that circulation. You also want to make sure that you don't miss something obvious. Okay, I'm looking at the hip wound here, that's what obviously strikes me, but did I miss something else? Was there another injury, another gunshot wound? You don't want to miss those things because those can obviously cause a greater problem later on down the road.
Dr. Gupta, appreciate the insights. We'll keep in touch as the day progresses. We have some new information just into CNN on this incident. The U.S. Secret Service spokesman telling CNN the shooter in the Alexandria shooting who posted anti-Trump comments on social media was not on the Secret Service radar. That from our justice producer, American Lawyer. That important information because of those postings. Often such individuals do end up on the Secret Service radar. Let's talk more now about the response by the police and this investigation. Here for the conversation, Tom Fuentes, our senior law enforcement analyst, the former FBI assistant director, and law enforcement analyst Charles Ramsey, the former District of Columbia police chief, and the police commissioner in Philadelphia, and CNN law enforcement analyst James Gagliano. Chief Ramsey, I want to start with you just from the sense of, again, hindsight is always 20/20, and we're over-judgmental sometimes in the moment. But had not Steve Scalise been there with a security detail, we would likely be discussing a much greater tragedy today. Do the protocols about members of Congress out in public, sadly, but do they need to be reconsidered?
Well, I'm sure that the U.S. Capitol Police Chief and his staff are taking a look at that and reevaluate security, but you have an awful lot of members of Congress that would require protection.
I can't hear you. And Tom Fuentes, as you hear about this crime scene as it plays out, the FBI is now in charge because a member of Congress was shot. Obviously, the Alexandria police were first to respond. Capitol Police also exchanged fire. Take me through the complexities of an investigation when you have two separate law enforcement agencies who exchanged fire, discharged their weapons, and then now the feds being in charge of the whole enterprise.
Well, John, these agencies work together all the time. They work together on the Joint Terrorism Task Forces. The chiefs know each other. The special agents in charge and other executives of the FBI work together all the time. So it's a seamless effort when it comes to that. But by federal law, it's not just a member of Congress, but members of their staff, federal law enforcement officers, Supreme Court justices. So all the way down from the President of the United States down to, like I said, staff members come under the federal jurisdiction that if they're attacked, it's an FBI case. The FBI takes the lead in the investigation. So that's what you have here, the staffers. And this is exactly what happened in the Giffords shooting in Tucson, Arizona in 2011, when members of her staff were killed. That also came under. The fact that she was injured came under, and a federal judge attending her event was killed. That comes under FBI jurisdiction.
James Gagliano, from everything you've heard from the briefings we've had so far from the crime scene, what are your biggest questions as we go forward? They seem convinced, and they seem convinced pretty early on, the shooter acted alone.
Yeah, John, I think the special agent in charge of the Washington field office, Mr. Slater, handled it appropriately. Information needed to be given to the public. I think that was put out in time. The first thing they've got to figure out, they've got to determine whether or not it's an act of terrorism or not. And terrorism is defined as violence or intimidation in the pursuit of political goals. And the reason why you've got to rule that out first is because usually attendant to terrorist attacks, there are cells, there are other folks that are involved, and from the tactical resolution perspective, we want to make sure that there's no more killing or no more damage to property. Then you kind of work through the scenario, and former Assistant Director Fuentes is correct. The FBI has purview in certain instances. The first is a terrorist attack, and think about this. It took 1963, the assassination of President Kennedy, for us to have a federal law in the books that gave the FBI purview over an assassination attempt or successful assassination of a president. We've been very, very lucky here. There's a number of considerations going forward, and I think as Tom also pointed out, it's good that we've got a collegial law enforcement effort, folks working at the local, state, and federal level.
And Tom Fuentes, as this continues out, obviously, as I said at the top to Chief Ramsey, we'd be having a different conversation if those two Capitol Police officers were not there today. Members of Congress, Democrats, Republicans, should be able to go practice baseball in the morning, but what do you think the conversations will be today, tomorrow, and next week as this gets a little bit in the rearview mirror about whether security needs to be improved?
Well, I think for now, John, everybody's going to say it needs to be improved. This is the same discussion that we had in 2011 at the Tucson shooting. Everybody's going to say we need to protect Congress members, we need to do this, we need to do that. And by about 6 months from now, it doesn't happen, it kind of gets forgotten, other things take the news. And that's the unfortunate thing in these kind of incidents, that, you know, nothing changed after the last one other than the leaders of the House, obviously in this case Representative Scalise, had a detail to protect him, but nobody else did. So if he hadn't been there, there'd be no protection and we'd have a massacre on our hands.
Chief Ramsey, in the sense of how the D.C. Police Department, in this case it was Alexandria, but in your experience as the D.C. Police Chief, coordinated with the Capitol Police, then you bring in the other law enforcement agencies, what are the pros of that, and what are your questions of worry? Any worries about bureaucracy as they try to piece all this together?
No, it's really remarkable how well the agencies work together. Tom's absolutely right. These agencies all work together on a regular basis within the National Capital Region. It's pretty seamless. Everybody comes together. Roles and responsibilities are laid out, and you go to work. I mean, so it's really not as complicated as some who work outside of the Beltway may think. They'll get to the bottom of this, whatever assistance they need from Capitol Police, Alexandria Police, police in Illinois, whatever they need, the FBI will get.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your insights on this difficult day. Helps us take a look not only back at the horror that happened this morning, but how the investigation will go looking forward. Again, a very somber day on Capitol Hill. More details coming to us. I appreciate you joining us at Inside Politics. Stay with us. Our live coverage of this breaking news story continues after a quick break with Wolf Blitzer.
All right, folks, stay tuned. I'm working on this broadcast and for the blog form. Right now, I'll go ahead and take a little break. In 2 more minutes, the top of the hour breaking news break is going to begin with new developments. Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign volunteer is the one responsible for shooting representatives and Majority Whip Representative Scalise at a baseball practice game, Congressional baseball practice game today in Virginia. Had it not been for Senate Majority Whip Scalise's security detail, it would have been very horrible. They were able to shoot the gunman. And the gunman turns out to be a Bernie Sanders campaign volunteer. Bernie Sanders already gave his remarks, and we didn't catch them all because it was during part of the news segment. But at the beginning of the hour, I hope we will have his full remarks. A lot of thoughts going through all of our heads right now, but let's just listen to this while we can. It is the immediate reactions after this event. It's not going to be, as they said, just like the 2011 Representative Gifford being shot at, and a couple years later people forget about it. This is quite different, as well as part of the same type of event, but quite different. Here's the breaking news.
We're following breaking news here in the nation's capital. A gunman opens fire during a congressional baseball practice. The shooting appears to be deliberate.
He asked me if this team was the Republican or Democrat team practicing. I responded that it was a Republican team practicing, and he proceeded to shoot Republicans.
I looked outside and saw the man with the gun. He was crouched behind a wooden piece of stand.
I hear a loud bam, and I look around, and behind third base in the third base dugout, which is cinder block, I see a rifle. And then I hear another blam, and I realize that there's an active shooter.
You can see Steve Scalise out in the field. He dragged himself after he was shot from near second base about 10 or 15 yards into the field. He was laid motionless out there.
The emotional shock of seeing your friend shot, where you're helpless, you have a baseball bat, they have a rifle, you're defenseless.
Our lives were saved by the Capitol Hill Police. Had they not been there, I think it would have been a massacre.
This could be the first political rhetorical terrorist act, and that has to stop.
An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer. It's 1 p.m. here in Washington. Thanks very much for joining us.
Lordy, it's Wolf Blitzer. I'm going to try to find another channel, folks, but go ahead and keep listening.
And 4 other people shot and wounded when a gunman opened fire during a baseball practice early this morning. In remarks just a little while ago, President Trump announced that the gunman is dead.
Authorities are continuing to investigate the crime, and the assailant has now died from his injuries. The FBI is leading the investigation and will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. Many lives would have been lost if not for the heroic actions of the 2 Capitol Police officers who took down the gunman despite sustaining gunshot wounds during a very, very brutal assault. We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country. We can all agree that we are blessed to be Americans.
Here are the latest developments in the investigation. Authorities have now identified the gunman as 66-year-old James Hodgkinson of Belleville, Illinois. This according to a law enforcement source. Investigators have found anti-Trump postings on his social media pages. He was also...
And let it be noted that Wolf Blitzer and CNN opened up their 10 o'clock hour or 1 o'clock p.m. hour news with a gunman, not a Bernie Sanders campaign volunteer. Had it been a Republican volunteer for another, you know that it would have been a Republican campaign volunteer for, say, Donald Trump shoots representative. But this is CNN. And this is why I have CNN going for you folks, because I wanted it to just get what they are saying. But stay tuned, folks. I want to change the channel to Fox, the only cable news network that is partially fair and balanced enough for live.
I believe even when you came here, just take us back to the moment this morning.
They're still showing stuff. Well, okay, I'll give them this. They're getting their talking points ready to handle the bombshell that one of their own shot the House Majority Whip, third in line of Congress representatives.
First base line, I batted and gone to the field and had come back and was just talking to Joe Barton from Texas at that time, and kind of looked at each other and then realized it was gunfire. A number of us headed for the dugout, the first base dugout, believing that the gunman was over on the, by the other dugout, and he was. So there were ultimately about 12 of us in that dugout, and a
few more would come.
Speaking of Senator Jeff Flake, he was there.
One of the staff members who had been shot while he was in center field. He made his way over to the dugout and climbed in, and we had a belt and put it on to try to staunch some of the bleeding.
How many shots?
Some people were estimating over 50. I think that's an understatement. Never a lot. He was well armed.
Did you get at all a glimpse either at the shooter or at the weapon?
I did at the shooter, not the weapon. I think he had lost the rifle by the time I saw him. He'd worked away back behind home plate, behind the fence, and I was trying to see if he was down. I wanted to get out to where Steve Scalise was to see if we could drag him over to the dugout. So I stood up, and the gunman was there just behind the fence, behind home plate, and he caught sight of where I was, and so we quickly, a bunch of us jumped down so as not to be in this line of fire, because he had a line of sight to us, and a number of us were there, and we worried that he would make his way around and get in the dugout, and then we'd be in a really bad situation.
Did you see him taken down?
No. We were tending to the staff member, and also Joe Barton's son, 10-year-old, was there. He made it to the dugout as well, and we quickly got him and put him under the bench and tried to hide him as much as we could. And then we heard the gunman's down, and that's when I ran out to Steve to see if we could staunch the bleeding there, and for the next 10 or 15 minutes we did that.
Describe that moment, and when you arrived, you say staunch the bleeding. When you got there, what were your thoughts about the seriousness of this?
You could see where he had crawled from, across some of the infield, and the trail of blood to where he was. He'd moved about 10 to 15 yards. Great effort to do that. I think he was trying to get away from the gunman.
Speaking to you?
Yes, he was, and he said that he needed water. He was coherent, trying to keep him talking. To make sure that he would stay coherent, and he did so. And then we cut away some of the jersey and whatnot, and tried to apply something to the wound. I had my batting gloves on, and those are pretty blood-soaked now.
Could you tell at that moment, one gunshot, when you first arrived, sort of how did you figure out exactly where it was?
That one was clear. We kept looking and feeling down the leg or looking for other blood. We tried to see an exit wound. Another member ran out.
Okay, folks, I'm turning over to Fox News right now, and they're playing a repeat of Donald Trump's remarks, so we've heard that.
Couldn't see it, but we were having a hard time moving. Somebody took off their shirt, and we put it on the wound, and that kept it.
Support me? Do, camping with the family.
No.
U-G-L-Y, you ain't got no alibi.
Say yes for water. What else did you say?
Yeah, he was just trying
Gonna try that again.
Ask him,
Hold tight.
Others or where the gunman was, but we were just glad he was talking and he wasn't passing out.
Obviously, it's a chaotic situation. You're not tracking time, but do you have any sense of how quickly it was?
Practice, I was the shortstop, Scalise was at second, and Trent Kelly was at third, and I heard a gunshot, and I yelled at Trent. That's a gunshot. I think the guy, initial shot, he was trying to hit Trent, he missed it. And Trent yelled shooter, and we all broke for the first base side of the field to get off the field, and he fired 2 more times, and I saw Scalise go down.
I'm joined now by Michael Balboni, former Homeland Security Advisor for the state of New York, and you bring an interesting perspective to this because of your experience.
And so I'm actually counsel to the National Association of Sergeant of Arms around the nation for all the different state capitals. We talk oftentimes about this type of a situation when you have a threat against individual members of the legislative body. How do you respond? What are the things that you try to do? In my former career, I've actually worked with the State Police Protective Unit for the governor. And what do you do to try to eliminate these threats and protect them? Here is one of the nightmarish scenarios. But for the Capitol Police being there at this time, that could have gone on for a very long time because members aren't armed at a baseball game.
Yeah, and the shooter, I am expecting, did not expect that he would face return fire because the Capitol Hill officers who were there apparently were plainclothed.
Right, and a lot of things that we take for granted, the ability to get out into the public, as a former Speaker Newt Gingrich talked about, that's our democracy. You have to have that interaction between our representatives and the people. So to think that you could actually put everybody in an envelope outside of the Capitol and their offices, very hard.
Yeah, you've got 535 members of Congress. You can't hire 535 Capitol Police to guard each one of them 8 hours a day, and then 2 more for the other 16.
What's happening now, really, is that people are taking a look at the Capitol Police and the Sergeant of Arms in our nation's capital. They're concerned about copycats. They're concerned about what the public schedule is. How did this guy know that this was a practice that was going on? They're going to kind of scrub those schedules to see, are there other events that could provide a target as well? And you say, well, wait a minute, you can't do that forever. No, you can't, but in the current situation, you're going to have to take a step back and take a look at what the vulnerabilities are right now.
Well, every one of these events kind of changes the learning curve. Gabby Giffords obviously was shot at a congressional event. What are the changes that will take place going forward because of this? I mean, they're going to look for those public events?
Well, I think that what is so unique about this, obviously, is that as with the Gabby Giffords situation, as with George Wallace's assassination, you have an individual that's targeted. You don't have a group of individuals, particularly on a partisan basis. Now, as again, people have pointed out, the guy was obviously deranged. But nonetheless, do these gatherings provide another vulnerability, another target for individuals? Are there ways that you can lessen? As you and I have talked about so many times, John, you don't eliminate the risk, you manage it. And that's really what you're going through right now.
Are we? I mean, we've heard a little bit about the suspect, and I've seen some of the postings on his Facebook page. Suspect, the gunman who is now dead. Are we going to hear in the days ahead that there were warnings that he said, "Man, I'd like to go to Washington and shoot all those guys," that kind of thing?
So already you're seeing some of his Facebook posts. You're seeing the letters to the editor. You're seeing you're developing a profile of this individual. And there are going to be statements that are going to jump out, like, let's destroy the Republicans and their whatever, that partisan basis. Those are the rantings. And again, just as with terrorism generally, it's so difficult to be able to determine when someone's actually going to do something or if they're just saying something.
He was a big Bernie Sanders supporter and volunteer, and hats off to Senator Sanders for going to the Senate floor and absolutely deploring the conduct that his former campaign volunteer perpetrated this morning on so many members of Congress and their staffs. Michael Balboni. Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Heather.
Breaking news for you, this Fox News alert. We want to take you out to San Francisco. This is just outside of the downtown area where apparently a workplace shooting has happened. And we can tell you that USA Today, and USA Today only apparently at this time, is saying that police have an unidentified person in custody following this shooting that happened at a UPS facility in San Francisco's Potrero Hill neighborhood. Police have sealed off the streets in the area. You can see this live shot right now. It took place around 9 a.m. local time. We can tell you that San Francisco General Hospital is located about a mile from the city. They are reporting that they have received multiple victims. We're told that they were told to expect as many as 6, including the suspect. At the hospital, you can see the doctors were lined up outside the entrance to the emergency room waiting for the injured. This is a very large facility, this UPS processing facility. And as we said, it's about 2 miles south of the downtown area. The multi-story building clearly visible along Highway 101, if you're familiar with that area. According to other reports, the gunman opened fire on the 3rd floor of the building. KCBS radio reporting that the shooter, a male believed to be a UPS driver, was taken into custody and was being transported to the hospital. So that now being reported by 2 news outlets. We will continue to follow this story as it develops. Once again, this what is believed to be a workplace shooting happening in San Francisco right now. John?
And still to come on happening now, we are waiting for an update on the condition of Congressman Steve Scalise, who is reportedly stable at a D.C. hospital. We don't know whether the surgery on him is finished or not. We will talk to a trauma surgeon about treating that kind of gunshot wound as we get more information on today's attack in Virginia.
I couldn't hear the gunman. I heard the police saying to the gunman, I don't know if it's like, get down or put your gun down. And then I heard some of the players saying, just shoot him. It's like, they shot one of his buddies and they were shooting at them and
Sarah is a 5th grade teacher. When it comes to molding young minds, nobody does it better.
You got that, folks? Even Fox News doesn't have their talking points. So if you're listening live right now, please stay tuned because you're going to get it live here. As everybody else, independent and mainstream news, are gathering the talking points. And to top all this off, the day's not even over yet. And this comes on the heels of last night, a big, huge high-rise fire in London. But that appears to have been something that was in the making because tenants have been complaining about disrepair of that building. So it appears that it may not. It just could have been an accident and maybe not terrorism related, but it still is a horrible thing in light of Manchester and a couple of London attacks within the past several weeks. And on breaking before this break, there in San Francisco, a UPS driver has been taken in custody after he fired some shots. So there was a shooting in San Francisco. It's breaking news. And the shooter, which is a UPS driver, a workplace incident, he is in custody. And so this is my last day off of work, folks, until starting a new job tomorrow. I'm going to be delivering hay and grain and feed. Can you believe that? A new job, and it's the first. I'm 53 years old. It's the first normal job that I've had since my children were babies. All the other jobs in between that, it's just been partial nightmare, partial roller coaster, one job after another. It just seemed, I'm the last of the baby boomers, born in 1964, and the American dream started getting more and more difficult to achieve. Lots of my friends have achieved it, and but through circumstances, I'm probably going to be working for the next 20 years or so. So that would be until I'm 73. But if you are a follower of my blog, michaeldtobin.blogspot.com, or this Spreaker broadcast, The Michael Tobin Show, on Straight Up Network, you've been reading what my desires are for the Lord, and that is to be a first responder with the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team and Franklin Graham's Samaritan's Purse. Okay, here's the...
Trump letting us know that the House Majority Whip is in stable condition after today's shooting. Congressman Scalise underwent surgery at MedStar Hospital in Washington. Another victim at the same hospital is also in stable condition, so that's good news. Two other gunshot victims are at George Washington University Hospital, and you can see the scene there right now. So let's bring in Dr. Kelly Powers, who is a surgeon at Stanford Hospital and is familiar with gunshot wounds. She worked at Washington.
They're still bringing all kinds of other guests on the news. They're not speaking anything about how it turned out that the shooter in Virginia was a Bernie Sanders campaign volunteer. So they have to be just gathering all their talking points. But as I was saying before the news break ended, folks, this is very disheartening because we're dependent on the mainstream media right now for events. And leading into, if you've been reading my blogs and such, my desire is to be full-time broadcasting, full-time podcasting, and able to respond anywhere, to get on a plane and be where the news is happening. And frankly, folks, it's happening here in Southern California too, and I've already covered a few things only because I've been here. But throughout the decades, the years, I've got quite a bit of things I've written about, made videos about for YouTube, and further on back, 5 years as a news director for an AM Christian radio station in Virginia, the same small town that's kind of like Mayberry, where the Beltway shooter was shot and killed and caught back in the day. That was the guy that was shooting people from the trunk of his vehicle, and he went on a long cross-country trip, and he was finally captured about a mile from where the radio station where I was just a Christian DJ playing good music and good programming. But I was a news director, production manager, and the assistant manager back then. So I've got quite a couple of decades, 20 plus years, almost 30 of being news-minded, but raising my children between them then also. My children are like 31, 30, and 28 now, or 29, 31, and 32. They're all going to be a year older in July. All three of my children have a birthday in July. And they're not triplets. Their mother's birthday is in July. Their grandmother's birthday is in July. And their great-grandmother's birthday is in July. All on their mom's side. And we all still love each other. But anyhow, horrendous events today. But please keep me in prayer. Let's keep this nation in prayer. But my desire is to be able to respond full-time, podcasting and disaster response. And I take you back to the news.
In Alexandria, where many of my friends and colleagues.
Chuck Schumer speaking from earlier today.
I would like to take a moment to address my fellow veterans.
Oh, Lordy. They just broke for another. There's big business in this horrible day. I'm very disappointed. First, the news is that a politician has been shot at, attempted to be killed, which is huge news. And then, after all the remarks from politicians, it turns out that Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, 2016 presidential campaign volunteer, turns out to be the shooter. And they're cutting to a break again. And again, for probably the third or fourth time, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're getting their speaking points. Because now that we have something that's considered the real thing, they don't know what to say. They always seem to know what to say, and it's a whole bunch of accusations back and forth. But this, folks, is the real thing. And these are the immediate reactions, and you're hearing it right now on my show, The Michael Tobin Show. The immediate reactions. And it is huge. It is a big deal. So, first I brought to you CNN for the reasons that I disclosed earlier, because I wanted to see what their type of a media talking points were going to be. And it got a little bit nauseating, so I had to turn to Fox to see if we could get some more detail, level-headed output from them. Input and output. And it's kind of the same thing. They're showing repeats and repeats of what has already happened instead of what is now at hand. The big news is a political campaign volunteer was a shooter, and he's dead. And thank God nobody else died. It truly is a miracle, folks, whether this is a conspiracy or whether it was somebody who went off the handle. This is a miracle, folks, and it is the real thing. Whether it's a conspiracy, that would be the real thing. A so-called false flag, that would be the real thing. And if it was somebody who actually did fly off the handle, which very rarely turns out to be the truth in an assassination, depending on what you read and what you believe. But regardless of what the motives behind a situation like this is, it still is a real thing. But this is a huge real thing. Here's back to the news.
To the scene in San Francisco at a UPS facility where there has been a workplace-involved shooting. UPS now telling the Associated Press that 4 people have been injured and taken to hospitals in the San Francisco area, and that the shooter was in fact an employee. We also need to tell you, if you are in that area, that police are still asking people to stay away for safety purposes. This is specifically in the Potrero Hill neighborhood. The Potrero Hill neighborhood, which is about 2.5 miles downtown.
So I've got a conspiracy for you folks. Is this a distraction? Because things did not go as planned at the Republican baseball practice. Nobody died. So now they have to get their... Is this why it's taking so long to get their talking points? Okay, chew on that, folks. Here's back in the news.
All expected to recover. The shooter, identified as James Hodgkinson, died from his injuries. Florida Representative Ron DeSantis spoke to Fox and Friends earlier today, sharing some information that suggests the shooting was politically motivated.
Okay, it's 10:26 a.m. Pacific time.
Guy that walked up to us that was asking whether it was Republicans or Democrats.
Whether it's politically motivated, this is the first detailed talking points, folks.
Where all this happened.
Joining me now, Congressman Joe Crowley of New York. He's the chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. But this is a day when you don't wear blue.
They finally have their talking points.
Capitol Hill, do you, Congressman?
No, you certainly don't. This attack today, this horrific attack that involved my colleague Steve Scalise, another former staffer, as well as the 2 police officers, was an attack upon all of us.
Speaking as Joe Crowley, Democrat, New York Congressman.
And you've described the House as a family. I mean, it's a big family and it's a fractious one, but you call it a family.
Yeah, I think, that oftentimes...
They're still stalling for time, folks. It's 1:27 p.m. Pacific time. I mean, it's 1:27 p.m. Eastern time, and we're just barely getting into any serious dialogue about the fact that the dead gunman, was a volunteer for Senator Bernie Sanders for the 2016 presidential elections. So what we're waiting for now is when the serious discussion is going to start. So, hey, this is historical right here.
That's the terrible irony here. I mean, this was in preparation for the Congressional baseball game, which is kind of a long-revered institution where both sides, fight against one another, but for a very good cause.
And it's always done, John, in the best of spirit. We tease each other. We don't necessarily practice. We don't practice at all in the same field. And that's for a reason. We have our little secret weapons, and they have theirs. They don't want us to know about how they're training. But it's all for a good cause, for charity, for the Boys and Girls Club of D.C., for the literacy program here in the capital region, that both Democrats and Republicans are committed to. And this one game a year that's been going on for the better part of a century now has become a hallmark of the year. And there's something that members on both sides look forward to, and doing it in camaraderie, doing for the best of reasons to help people who have less than we do.
Well, we hope it's certainly a moment when members of both parties in the Capitol can, as they already have, sort of link arms and support one another. But what do you say to the viewers out there who might be taking the political rhetoric a little too literally these days?
Well, one thing I would say to them is that when I had the opportunity today, I walked up to my good friend Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House. We were both elected the same year. And I said, Paul, you hit it out of the park. You hit all the right chords. You did a great job. You did us all proud. That's one Democrat speaking to the Republican leader of the House, the Speaker of the House. And I said it with sincerity. I meant it sincerely and with passion. I think Paul did a good job. My my constituents and all the constituency throughout this great country needs to know that we're first Americans. We're all Americans first.
Yes.
An attack upon one is an attack upon all of us, and that's how we're taking this today. Democrats, Republicans, and all political persuasions unite here today in opposition to this attack and say it was disgusting, despicable. No matter what the political cause, never take violence into action.
Good advice. Let's hope we can all take that to heart. Congressman Joe Crowley, Democrat of New York, and the head of the Democratic caucus in the House.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Well, lawmakers offer prayers for their colleagues and praise for the Capitol Police after the attack at the ball field. Congressman Steve Scalise and 3 other victims now recovering from their injuries as they get strong support from the president.
America is praying for you, and America is praying for all of the victims of this terrible shooting. I spoke with Steve's wife, Jennifer, and I pledged to her our full and absolute support.
Washington's out of control, the debt's out of control. Nothing in that story is going to change, so you have to.
The U.S. debt is increasing an average of nearly $2.4 billion every day.
This is an unsustainable practice. It's going to end, but when it does, it's going to end very rapidly and very disruptively.
I've never seen so many commercials on a news. So many commercials within just a couple of minutes every break. So, folks, it's now 1:31 p.m. Eastern Time. And still, after over half an hour ago when breaking news released that the shooter turned out to be, the dead shooter turned out to be a Bernie Sanders presidential 2016 campaign volunteer, there still has not been anything about the fact. You would think that every time they come from a news break on cable news, and Fox is doing the same thing, so there's no sense in going to MSNBC or CBS or ABC to see if they're talking about it. It's really giving me a stomach ache just from the aggravation. But you would think that coming from each news break, it would say Representative Scalise and other representatives at baseball practice shot by 2016 Bernie Sanders presidential campaign volunteer. Is it just too much of a tongue twister to begin like that? Hardly, no. Because I can't stand sounding redundant, but had this been a Republican presidential campaign volunteer, each news break will end and news segment will begin with Republican 2016 presidential campaign volunteer shoots Democrat representatives. Had this been a polar opposite situation. And Fox would be complaining already that the other networks are beginning their news segments such as that. Oh, Jesus, please. So, folks, we're wrapped around the fingers of mainstream media right now. So this is history. If you're listening to this, this is the podcast to listen to. So by the time you listen to this, go ahead and download it while it's there, because I may just release it from being able to be downloaded for some reason. But I won't do that. But it's unedited. All of my shows are unedited, folks. Okay, let's see if they talk about it.
Day just across the Potomac from Washington. Congressman Steve Scalise recovering, thank goodness, after undergoing surgery after he and 3 others were shot. A man opened fire at a ballpark in Alexandria, Virginia.
A man.
That's where Congressman Scalise and other lawmakers gathered to practice for tomorrow's congressional charity baseball game. That suspect has now died of his injuries after a shootout with police. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill coming together today to show support for their colleagues. Chief Congressional Correspondent...
That suspect. They're calling the guy everything else except for the opposite of what mainstream media would be calling it, had it been the opposite of what it is.
We are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us...
It seems that they had some very nice polished speeches already ready also. So, how many news breaks has it been? At least 6 from the time that we were told that the shooter was a I'd say a volatile candidate's campaign volunteer for the most volatile presidential candidate. Trump is volatile in a sense, but Sanders is are volatile in another sense, as we all know. So everything that they're showing right now is just a bunch of hoopla in light of what turned out.
Discourse that has led to hate has led to gunfire. I never thought I'd go to baseball practice for charity and have to dodge bullets.
All are praising the heroism of Capitol Police and the local first responders. The question is, or the big concern is, if Scalise, a member of the GOP leadership team, had not been there, there would not be any security.
That's not the only question.
There could have been a massacre. Heather?
But thank goodness there wasn't. Mike Manuel live for us. Thank you.
It's really unfortunate, the damage that was done, but I think what we saw today again was people pulling together, and hopefully what comes out of this is a greater sense of unity and a recognition that, you know, we may be Republicans and Democrats, but we're all Americans, and we need to come together, we need to work together and try and solve our problems in a way that maintains civility and doesn't lead to these senseless acts of violence.
Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota during our first hour, reinforcing the fact that despite the political climate, Americans have to work together, and violence should not be the solution. Joining us now, Michelle Jawando, Vice President of Legal Action for the Center for American Progress and former General Counsel and Senior Advisor to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Dave Hoppe is also with us, former Chief of Staff to Speaker of the House Paul Ryan. I want to play a little bit more of what your former boss, Dave, had to say, as well as Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi when they spoke on the House floor right around noon today, Eastern Time. Listen.
I ask each of you to join me, to resolve, to come together, to lift each other up, and to show the country, to show the world, that we are one house, the people's house, united in our humanity. It is that humanity which will win the day, and it always will.
I prayed for Barack Obama, and now I continue to pray for him. And I pray for Donald Trump, that his presidency will be successful, and that his family will be safe. Because it is about family.
The question, I guess, Dave, is how long can this spirit of unity that has temporarily overtaken Capitol Hill, how long can it last?
Well, both very good statements, and there can be differences in politics without being so disagreeable and taking language to a point where people are really attacking each other's motives, and that can happen, and that should happen, and I think this will help with that. Do you expect this to last 3 months, 6 months, 8 months? No, but the question is, can we start having debates that are debates about policy? I thought that Senator Scott this morning, in one of the statements he made, was very eloquent about talking about how people can get together. They still have bipartisan prayer groups on the Hill. That's an essential thing. It's very important. Those are the types of things which allow people to see each other as individuals, as people who share goals, but maybe not the same political ideas. And that's an important part of it. So, to the degree more of that goes on and that there is more working back and forth and the language calms down a little bit, I think it will help over time. But I can't predict how long it will go on. I think it will have an effect, and a good effect, for a while, and maybe start some people thinking about, let's debate on policy, but let's keep things a little cooler, and let's look for where we can find ways to work together.
Give us your perspective, Michelle. You've worked on Capitol Hill. Does this horrible event, does it possibly have a silver lining? Could it, in fact, cool down some of the rhetoric?
Without question, I think this gives us a moment to reflect on where we've been as a country, the language and the way that we're interacting with one another. My former boss, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, is co-captain of actually the women's Congressional baseball team, and next week is their game, next week Wednesday, where they raise funds for young cancer survivors. And as a congressional staffer, I've worked on the House and the Senate side. I just think about those moments of going to the game and you're there with your Republican colleagues and your Democratic colleagues, and it truly is a moment of bipartisanship. But after that game, what we found is that the senator was able to work with her colleagues like former Senator Ayotte and others to move forward on legislation. And so these moments are so important because they both develop relationships, the old kind of relationships that we used to see on Capitol Hill, where you can coordinate and work with members, but it also fosters a type of respect for one another in the sense of the word of how you can work together as colleagues, as friends, and on the baseball field working together to get that win.
Of course, it was then Congresswoman Gabby Giffords who famously became such a victim of this terrible kind of hatred and crime. She released a statement saying it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, nor if you're a senator or a representative, nor a staffer or a sworn officer. If you serve the institution of Congress, you are connected to your colleagues, current and former, by a shared sense of service to ideals far greater than yourself. This shooting is an attack on all who serve and all who participate in our democracy. If only the shooter had understood that before he opened fire, Dave. How do you get that message out to the broader public?
Well, in most of these cases, you have somebody who obviously has some sort of a significant mental problem. But one thing you can do, I think, is start talking, once again, talking in ways that lower the temperature. And we see it on, whether it's on Twitter or you see it on Facebook or many of the different ways we have of communicating with each other. People tend to do it almost as if they don't act like there's another person on the other end. The House and the Senate are very human institutions when you get right down to it. And the individuals there can work together and often do work together more times than people see. But we have to, throughout society, I think, and it's not just on the political side, but throughout society, look to cool things off just a little and act like there's somebody else, another human being on the other end of the line. Once again, you can disagree. You just don't have to be disagreeable in doing so. And you can find ways to work together if you just think of them as another human being, which we don't do sometimes now, I'm afraid.
Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Michelle Jawando and Dave Hoppy, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Fearful for their lives on a baseball field. Today's attack in Virginia shows that people can be targeted anywhere, but public figures may be especially vulnerable. Why our next guest says keeping our nation's leaders safe is similar to tracking terrorism all around the world, as we continue to hear from lawmakers who were caught in the middle of the attack and are putting on a very brave face.
This is a charity baseball game. We've played it for almost 100 years. It's for a very good cause. I can only speak for myself, but I hope we continue the game. It's what, in some ways, what democracy is all about.
Here is something big banks don't want you to know about your IRA or 401k. Store your retirement at home with the Augusta Home Delivery Gold.
Okay, folks, I'm getting pretty perturbed about all this. As I prepare for my blog today, my immediate thoughts, current thoughts right now is it's 1:44 p.m. Eastern Time. and still no opening news segment discussing anything about the gunman being a 2016 Bernie Sanders presidential campaign volunteer. Now, is this San Francisco event with the UPS driver as a shooter at a workplace event a distraction because suddenly the planned killing was unsuccessful in Virginia and the, quote, news is scrambling for new talking points? Conspiracy theory? Well, the MSN mainstream media keep saying the question is this and that, but nothing about how remarkable it is that the dead shooter was a candidate, 2016 presidential campaign volunteer. It also seems the major speeches and even the House chaplain prayer was pretty well polished, too polished for the timing, in my humble opinion. Is it just me, or is there something else that stinks about this story? And I put in parentheses, besides me, haters. Oh, man. Dear Jesus, help us. Okay, it's another news break for Fox. When they come back, will they finally have their talking points ready? We'll see. But right now, Fox 40, which is a Northern California news channel, has live coverage, live helicopter coverage of the area where the UPS shooter went on his rampage. So they're a local news channel, so they're covering this. While national cable news is still covering the Virginia ballpark shooting. Something else stinks about this story, folks. And dear God in heaven, help us, Lord. And I'll go back on my diatribe, people, about what my desires are for the Lord is to be a full-time podcaster. And as you see, I'm here in California. It's about a 9-hour drive from here in San Diego County to San Francisco. That's not really something that I'd be driving up to, though. Okay, the end of another news break.
People. It's just fortunate because Steve Scalise is a member of leadership. He has a security detail there. Otherwise, we would just be a bunch of guys out on a normal morning practicing. But I think the fact that we practice there every morning, and it's a group of Congress people together, sometimes, Joe, as many as 25 people, maybe 30.
22 members here today.
You may have been something in which somebody was able to anticipate our being there and being vulnerable.
Pennsylvania Congressman Pat Meehan on the vulnerability of our nation's leaders, talking about the shooting of House Majority Whip Steve Scalise at a congressional baseball practice this morning, echoing what we have heard from many people many times today, that if it wasn't for Scalise's security detail, this could have been a massacre. And Bob Strang is the former co-chair of New York Anti-Terrorism Task Force and advises schools on security as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Heather.
So you've been listening to the same reports that we've been hearing throughout the day. And because Congressman Scalise was in a position of leadership, he happened to have this extra security detail, and they stepped in and saved countless lives.
Absolutely. Think if they weren't there, and if leadership wasn't at that practice, and these practices go on all the time, I mean, we would have been looking at dozens and dozens of casualties. So the congressional staff, everyone on that baseball field this morning was very lucky that there were 2 congressional police there to stop this.
And they're still having the baseball game, the charity game, tomorrow night. We'll obviously see a dramatic difference in security.
That's right. I mean, you're going to see tremendous security, perimeters built around the field. They'll be very difficult for anyone to get in there.
And what do they need to learn from the situation that happened this morning?
You know, it's interesting because many people today are looking at suspects. We're looking at intelligence, and we want to identify people who are kind of outside the norm, people that may be writing letters to individuals. The Secret Service does this all the time. We do it in our company. We'll take a look and work with the Secret Service if someone is, writing letters and acting a little abnormal, a little aggressive. They're not necessarily saying, "I'm coming to kill you," but they're saying things that anyone would recognize are disturbing.
But how can you possibly do that? I mean, there's so many folks on social media, many of whom hide behind anonymity, although this particular suspect did not. And they say things like that. So how do you differentiate and pick out who is going to cross the line and become violent and who's not?
Well, Heather, if we had the answer, I mean, we'd probably be able to stop terrorism in the world, right? Because it's very similar in a lot of ways, and you've got to find out who's crossing the line, who becomes dangerous, who do you need to put surveillance on, how do you identify that person? And can you get informants? Do you have wiretaps? Do you just look at social media? How do you expand it? What determines whether you expand the surveillance on that individual? These are questions that we have to figure out because, unfortunately, in this country, we're seeing more and more extremists at every level, and we've got to figure out how to stop them. Because it's not good enough just to have a guy with a gun next to you. Because if they get
you don't want to live your life like that. You don't want to live your life where you have to be surrounded by armed guards constantly, or you just don't even leave your house. Thank you so much for joining us on this tough day. Thank you. John?
Steve Scalise, the Republican majority whip from Louisiana, has a long history of serving his state. And despite their differences, New Orleans Mayor and Democrat Mitch Landrieu reminds us we are all part of the American family. Coming up, how the majority whip is receiving an outpouring of support back in his home state.
It's just a burst of pipe. I can fix it.
Another commercial, folks. Big business. The mainstream media are making mega bucks, big bucks on all of these commercial breaks. Too many news breaks ending without a peep on the shooter being a Sanders campaign volunteer. It was a failed attempted assassination. Call it what it is. And with all of these news breaks, it's too many for them to continue getting the shadow benefit of the doubt that they are gathering their talking points, because their talking points have to be correct in this situation. I'm trying to call it the way it is. I believe they already had all their talking points, but because they know ahead of time if this is a conspiracy. So this is a possible conspiracy theory that I am presenting to you folks. If it truly is a conspiracy, they had their talking points, and now they're going hours during the 7 o'clock hour. 3 hours ago. I'm squeezing my head right now. This is just mind-boggling. God help us. I keep on saying that, and it really is a true prayer. When I say God help us, it really is a prayer. It's not just a figure of speech. And it's good to hear that Bernie Sanders has sent his prayers out. It's good that he can believe in prayer in light of his litmus test condemnation of a financial committee appointee that he recommended against, because the person who was the recommendation believed in prayer, obviously, but he's not allowed to believe anything else of who he prays to. And hypocrisy all over that. So, how about that? Bernie Sanders sent out his prayers. But I'm not here to be Mr. Judgmental, Mr. Judge, Mr. Condemner. I'm here to present the facts, folks, and the events. And at the end of this eyeglass commercial, we'll see. God, I wish I had a producer. I would count how many news breaks there were since the news of who the shooter was, what the shooter was released. Without news breaks, without ending, without a peep.
Stable condition now after undergoing surgery for a gunshot wound to his hip this morning. Scalise is one of the most powerful men in Washington, and those who know him best back home are offering their prayers. Scalise's political career started in Louisiana some 21 years ago. Casey Stiegel is live with the hometown response to today's events. Casey.
Yeah, John, no doubt the congressman has very deep roots in Louisiana. He was born in New Orleans and attended college at LSU in Baton Rouge. He has a home in his district that encompasses almost all of southern Louisiana. Scalise got his start in state politics, serving in the Louisiana House and Senate from 1996 to 2008. The 51-year-old sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee and also chaired the Republican Study Committee. He became House Majority Whip in 2014. The Republican also has been an ardent supporter of President Donald Trump. In fact, he spoke at this rally we attended back in December of last year. Listen.
We know what our mission is. We can't be more excited about the prospect of Donald Trump being our next president.
Now, reaction from fellow Louisianans has been pouring in. The governor said in a statement, I'm quoting here, "This appears to be an outrageous, cowardly attack on one of our own. Steve Scalise is a friend, colleague, and fighter for the people of Louisiana." And then the mayor of New Orleans had this to say a short time ago.
We go to battle politically, but personally, we're very respectful of each other and we like each other. And that's why an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. And more importantly, it's an attack on the country. And we all have to stand united against it.
Scalise has 2 children. His wife said to be en route to the East Coast to be by her husband's side. John.
Wow. All right, Casey Stiegel, live from Dallas. Casey, thank you.
And we will have continuing coverage on this brutal attack on democracy at a baseball practice for a charity game tomorrow night that has happened after this break.
After this break. I was just going to say that. After this break again, folks. Okay, I told you before the last break, 2 breaks ago, about a Fox News channel in Northern California that had a news coverage of helicopter footage of where the UPS shooting occurred in San Francisco. Well, I put my comment on there, folks, what I shared with you. My comment being too many news breaks without a peep of who the shooter turned out to be. And I commented on that live feed, it was a Facebook live tweet. Is this a distraction from the Virginia shooting? Because it was as a conspiracy theory, is this a distraction because it was a failed assassination attempt? And they are now scrambling for talking points, as they did have their talking points if the news mainstream media is in on what's happening as some kind of a false flag. But in so many words, that is what my comment was. Well, that news feed is no longer being broadcast right now, so they're not talking about that. But I asked, is it a distraction? So this dang, man, this story really does stink, folks, and it's not me. I put that out for my haters. Besides me. So I want to go ahead and find... there it is. My comment is, too many news breaks ending without a peep. The shooter is a Sanders campaign volunteer. It was a failed attempted assassination. Call it what it is. Okay, folks, you heard it from me, at least on audio first. But by the time you're listening, maybe you heard it from other people. But I am leaning towards believing that it was an assassination attempt, and it did not go as planned. And all of these polished speeches and words were pretty well polished. Even the Congress House chaplain's prayer was very oracle-like, you know. So, in light of the timing, I just think that I find it amazing that they were able to come up with those words so soon. So here's the end of a new news break. Fox News.
Steve Scalise is the majority whip. The whip is the person who is assigned to, wrangle the votes on any one issue, sort of whips people in line. So he has had personal contact with every member of the Republican caucus and is very well known.
And as that a leader, therefore he had extra security.
That's right. Thank you for joining us today. America's News Headquarters starts now.
2 p.m. Eastern Time.
This is a live look at the home of the suspect who went on a shooting rampage outside our nation's capital. One of his victims, the third most powerful Republican in the House. Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Francis. Federal agents are now at the home of James Hodgkinson outside of Chicago, searching for evidence and a motive. Among those attacked was House Majority Whip Steve Scalise, who was airlifted to a hospital for surgery. 2 others were also shot, including a staffer.
Did I hear you say motive?
Officer. All are now in stable condition. Here's what a friend of
Searching for a motive.
Just moments ago.
I mean, he was in a few fights and stuff like that, but nothing that would demonstrate violence as far as what he did.
What do you mean by that? Like fights with people?
Well, he never backed down from anybody. In a bar fight or whatever.
Wow, this guy, what was he, 63 years old? I'm 53. I can't remember the last time I was in a physical fight.
Most guys do.
Besides my own brother.
No, it never had nothing, no.
Lawmakers, aides, and others scrambled for their lives as the officers sprang into action.
I heard a bunch of what appeared to be shots. Pow, 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 pow.
I was in a fight with my brother. He's 2 years older than me, 6 years ago.
The gunman, James
And I was pretty
Hodgkinson,
shocked at my age
was shot by
that
Scalise's
I actually had a fight with him, but it's been decades
Police
before
say he
that
belonged
one.
to a number of anti-Republican Facebook groups and was a volunteer for Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. Leland Bitter joins us live from the scene. And Leland, what is the latest?
Okay, they got the talking points.
Melissa, you can see they're still working here on the crime scene. With that many shots fired, it will take police a long time to recreate each and every one of them. Eyewitnesses telling me that Hodgkinson had some type of assault weapon with him when he came out about 7 o'clock in the morning from the third base dugout here on this community baseball field where the Congressional teams were practicing. This is where the Republicans were. There's the dugout, and you see that blue backstop. That in that area is where we're told Hodgkinson came out and began opening fire. Steve Scalise was playing second base when he was hit, and that is when everyone took off for that first base dugout there. Happened right at about 7:10 a.m., and that is when Scalise's security detail began returning fire. Take a listen to how one eyewitness described the shootout. Based on what you could see, was it clear that this gentleman who the gunman was focused on shooting on the baseball field? He wasn't sort of randomly shooting at civilians or other people in the neighborhood.
He was not randomly shooting at civilians from what I saw. He seemed to me to be focused on shooting at the, I assume, Capitol Police officers who were behind a black SUV exchanging fire with him.
This is a bedroom community for Washington, D.C. So 7 o'clock in the morning, you had parents walking their kids to school, dogs in the dog park here, Melissa, and many are saying this could have been so much worse. Hodgkinson quite literally had an open field of fire. It took the Alexandria police about 3 to 4 minutes from the 911 call to get here. Rand Paul, the senator who was here, is saying that had it not been for Scalise's security detail, this would have been a massacre.
And Leland, you have some new information about House Majority Whip Scalise's condition?
Exactly. We're told the Majority Whip is now out of surgery and doing well. This is a video from earlier as he was being loaded onto a National Park Police helicopter that had landed here on the field and then airlifted him out to the hospital. You can see from the video that he's talking. We're told he was able to talk to people, talk to his wife before he went into surgery. He was shot in the hip, now out of surgery and is doing well, which is certainly a blessing. We need to hear a little bit more from the Capitol Police on the status of their officers, who quite literally, the head of the Capitol Police are calling heroes for their actions out here. Melissa.
Yeah, and our prayers are with all of them. Obviously, Leland Vitter, thank you for that. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, reacting to today's shooting moments ago.
We are united. We are united in our shock. We are united in our anguish. An attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell from California, who is a member of the Congressional baseball team but wasn't at practice today, and Democratic Congressman Ruben Kihuen from Nevada. He was at the Democrats' practice, and he tweeted out a photo of his colleagues gathering in prayer. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
You know, in the hours since, there's been a lot of talk about, is this about the rhetoric that's out there right now? Is it appropriate to ask that question, or is this about a deranged person? What do you think? Congressman Swalwell, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm glad that Steve Scalise is coming out of surgery. I pray for the Capitol Police and the staff. And whether it's about rhetoric, of course, you want to understand what the motivation was from a law enforcement perspective, and also just from a policymaker perspective. And I condemn whatever your politics are, it should never elevate to violence.
Yeah, Congressman Kihuen, what do you think about that?
Well, look, first of all, my thoughts and prayers are with Congressman Scalise, my colleague, Capitol Police, who went out there and sacrificed their lives to protect us, as well as all the victims. Look, today is more about coming together, not as Republicans or Democrats, but as Americans. And that's the reason why I tweeted that picture out. Before we gather in the prayer, I saw everybody gathering there, and I thought it was a very powerful moment that I needed to share with the rest of the world, that even Democrats pray and that we also care about our Republican colleagues.
I mean, what is it like to be someone there, and when you see something like this happen to one of your colleagues and you say that it could have been you, it could have been anyone that you knew in that area? I mean, what kind of impact does that have on you personally, Congressman Swalwell?
Well, Congressman Kihuen has a better attendance record this year at practice than I do, but when you're there, you see the police car parked there, and you kind of wonder, what's that for? I mean, who would get up so early to attack us? And you see why they're there and why they're so important. But, I worry about our staff and our family, because as you saw with Congresswoman Giffords, when she was shot, it was her staff who were killed and also hit, and a federal judge. And here it was also staff and police officers. And so, it's not just us, it's those who are around us that are in harm's way.
So you are in harm's way, and one of the conversations has been about why isn't there more security. I was talking to former Speaker Gingrich a few hours ago, and he made the point that there's a reason you're not surrounded by security all the time, because you're supposed to be accessible to people, that if we give up that idea that you could be walking in the supermarket and have someone, one of your constituents, someone you represent, walk up to you and talk to you, we lose democracy if you're then surrounded by security. What do you think about that, Congressman Kihuen?
Well, look, I can't help but think that this morning it could have been the Democrats as well, right? We're out there in the baseball field, we're having a good time getting ready for this charity baseball game between Democrats and Republicans, and then this type of thing happened. But look, I take pride in being accessible to my constituents, Republicans and Democrats, and it's unfortunate this type of incident makes you think twice, makes you want to check out your surroundings anywhere you go. And look, we're just humans like everybody else. We're here to serve the public, we're here to serve our country, and it's unfortunate this type of incident happens.
Is there a possibility to turn this terrible event into an opportunity, to take the chance to say, let's get together and try and turn down the volume a little bit, or turn down the temperature as well, or even to compromise a bit? I mean, maybe it's an excuse to compromise a bit and come together. Is that possible? Because people out there wonder, maybe it is, or maybe, it's too jaded of a setting.
Hopefully it is, and right now it's a tense time in Washington, D.C., and the baseball game has always been a refuge from the battles that take place underneath the dome, and hopefully it's not just tomorrow night that we come together. I was a 20-year-old here when September 11th happened, and I'll never forget getting sent home and then seeing on the Capitol steps Republicans and Democrats holding hands and singing God Bless America. Today, Congressman Keewan and I held hands with Republicans as we said a prayer inside this Capitol. And so I hope it's not just today and tomorrow, it's going forward.
Yeah, hopefully people really feel that way and follow through on it. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you.
My pleasure so much.
We have a live look right now at the suspect's house as the FBI is now leading the investigation. We are learning more about the suspected gunman who apparently volunteered on Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in Washington. And Catherine, what are you hearing now?
Well, Melissa, earlier today, a well-placed source identified the suspect as 66-year-old James T. Hodgkinson of Illinois. A Facebook page that bears the name of the suspect includes photos of Bernie Sanders, the Democratic presidential candidate, as well as anti-Trump rhetoric. Sanders spoke a short time ago on the Senate floor.
I have just been informed that the alleged shooter at the Republican baseball practice this morning is someone who apparently volunteered on my presidential campaign. I am sickened by this despicable act.
A local Illinois newspaper reported that Hodgkinson sent letters to the editor 5 years ago railing against Republicans and tax policies. In this August 2012 letter, Hodgkinson apparently advocated for raising taxes on top earners to 60%, writing, "I have never said life sucks, only the policies of the Republicans," Melissa.
So, Catherine, I mean, obviously that speaks to motive. Are there other things that we're learning about motive?
Well, the FBI has taken the lead for this investigation, with a law enforcement source telling Fox that the Bureau always steps in when police officers and members of Congress are assaulted. This morning, we really didn't get anything specific on motive or whether there was a threat.
We had no prior information that lead us to believe that anything like this was going to occur. I can just tell you from Virginia's perspective, we monitor all this. We had no threats before.
When certain members of Congress were being targeted, though, was this an intentional attack on them?
Too early to tell if they were targeted or not.
Also today, a spokesperson for the American Society of Home Inspectors confirmed to Fox News that James Hodgkinson, was a member of their trade association, but he dropped out in 2015 and he lived in Bellevue, Illinois. They had no further information about him or any derogatory information while he was a member. So really no indication yet about that motive, but just sort of a trail on social media. Melissa.
Catherine Herridge, great reporting as always. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
President Trump calling for unity and praising the officers who put themselves in harm's way. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live on the North Lawn. And what was the president's reaction, John?
Melissa, good afternoon to you. The president in the diplomatic reception room about 11:30 this morning. As you can imagine, his reaction was very heartfelt, very concerned for the welfare of the people who were involved, and also very concerned about what's happening in this country. The president, though, also, in expressing his concern for the victims of this, expressed a terrific praise for the members of the Capitol Hill Police security detail that Steve Scalise brings along with him for intervening here. Had they not been there, people like Senator Rand Paul, who was there, have said that this could have been an absolute massacre and that there might have been no one left alive. So the president was very, very complimentary, high praise for those Capitol Police officers who put their lives on the line, and also saying that he had reached out to the wife of Congressman Scalise. Here's the president.
America is praying for you, and America is praying for all of the victims of this terrible shooting. I spoke with Steve's wife, Jennifer, and I pledged to her our full and absolute support. Anything she needs, we're with her and with the entire Scalise family. I have also spoken with Chief Matthew Verderosa. He's doing a fantastic job, of the Capitol Police, to express our sympathies for his wounded officers and to express my admiration for their courage.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about whether the current political environment and the vitriolic nature of a lot of the political rhetoric might have led to this. The president did not address the political tone in this nation, but he did suggest that everyone who was on that field, whether they're members of Congress or whether they were part of the security detail, is united in a common purpose. Here against the president.
Everyone on that field is a public servant. Our courageous police, our congressional aides, who work so tirelessly behind the scenes with enormous devotion, and our dedicated members of Congress who represent our people. We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country.
Other condolences that were expressed from here at the White House. The First Lady tweeting out this morning, quote, "Thank you to the first responders who rushed in to help protect those who were hurt in Alexandria, Virginia. My thoughts and prayers to everyone." Melissa, been a lot of talk, obviously, about Congressman Steve Scalise and one of the aides, Zach Barth, and, of course, the two Capitol police officers. But as somebody whose name has not really been mentioned a whole lot is Matt Micah. He was the fifth victim of this. He is a director of government relations at Tyson's Food. According to local reporting in Michigan, his family is headed here to Washington, D.C. from East Lansing, Michigan to be with him. He is said to have suffered multiple gunshot wounds and is said by the family to be in critical condition. So I'm sure the thoughts and the prayers of the President and the First Lady are with his family as well.
Absolutely. John Roberts, thank you. So now for more on all of this, let's bring in Michigan Congressman Jack Bergman. He was at the practice this morning. Sir, that must have been terrifying. Can you tell us about it?
Well, it all happened very quickly. We certainly weren't expecting the attack, but within about a millisecond after that second shot, most people knew it was gunfire and we needed to start scrambling, and that's exactly what we did. People did the right thing, protected each other, protected themselves, and tried to stay out of the path, out of the sights, if you will, of the gunman. We were very fortunate that he couldn't gain access through the chain link fence, and that the Capitol Police, who are the true heroes today, took him down.
I've heard other descriptions of the scene, and when you talk about the gunfire that was coming from both the Capitol Police and from the perpetrator himself, that there was some confusion even about who was on what side or what was going on. Is that true? And I can't even imagine that.
Well, I couldn't assess that from my position. All I know that when you think about how the Capitol Police train, they train like the military. The first thing they had to do was assess how many shooters there were, that they weren't walking into an ambush, and then they had to engage very quickly and minimize any potential collateral damage. There's a YMCA right behind where they were shooting. There's a dog park to the other side of the field. They were absolutely spectacular in their execution and the timing of what they did.
So you were in the middle of this sobering event. Now I'm listening to the background. Here you are at work. Does it change the way you approach your job, or does it change the way you're looking at your colleagues there?
Well, actually, it doesn't change the way I approach my job, and it doesn't change the way I look at my colleagues, because number one, I approach my job very seriously. I'm a freshman congressman. I came here to go to work. Number two, I treat all of my colleagues with dignity and respect. And if anything, it's an event like this that makes us come closer together, so that we, as the elected, body of the people's house, can get the job done across any kind of party lines.
A lot of people now talking about the hateful rhetoric that's been going on. Congressman Rodney Davis had this to say. I'll ask for your reaction. Let's listen.
You wouldn't believe it from the news reports, but some of my best friends are on the other side of the aisle here in this institution. The majority of bills that we pass are passed on a very bipartisan basis, but it's the major issues that lead to political discourse that has, in my opinion, led to such an uptick in just hateful rhetoric of all sides. And I stand here today and say, stop. We have to stop.
A lot of passion there. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the hateful rhetoric has gotten just too hot? Go ahead.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with Rodney wholeheartedly in that the hateful rhetoric serves no positive purpose. In fact, today it obviously served a negative purpose. But unfortunately, and I'm looking all of the media in the eye when I say this, friendships and cordial relationships don't make good news. So I can tell you, especially as the president of the freshman class of Republicans, we are united along with our Democratic freshman counterparts to bring civility back to the 115th Congress.
So you think it's the media's fault?
I think the media is complicit if they keep inciting as opposed to informing.
So when we report or quote hateful things that are said, we're adding to it, we should just ignore it and not report it?
No, that's not what I said. I just think you need to make sure that you think twice about how your words and inflections and phrases are going to affect all the people who might see it. As leaders who've gone into fight, gone into a lot of tough places, we choose our words carefully to make sure all of our people understand the mission and understand what the end game is. And I think we can all learn by holding each other accountable when there are negative things like this, that we can all get better, everyone included. That includes the media, and that includes Congress.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for us, and that's great advice for all of you as well, sir. Thank you for coming on today, and we're glad to see that you're safe and sound and you made it. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, we've got continuing coverage of the attack on Republican lawmakers. We are live outside the hospital where Congressman Steve Scalise is being treated. We've got an update on his condition as we hear new details about how this whole thing unfolded.
A very loud shot that everybody thought sounded like a gun, and then boom, rapid succession after that. One staffer was shot out in the field, and he ran with a wound to the dugout. A lot of us dove into the dugout.
Say no to this because of my bladder. Thanks to
Did you hear that, folks? I didn't catch that guy's name, but he's a freshman congressman warning the news to choose their words carefully. And that's the first time I heard a caution like that after an event like this. It's about time somebody has the new news to caution about something like that. And the news commentator to not get all bent out of shape like this lady. She sort of did. She says, "Are you saying that we shouldn't report it?" Of course he's not saying that. And she got a little bit tense, possibly afraid that maybe she was being threatened, that she better watch her mouth or else. But folks, I've said it before, that when you're in the national spotlight reporting so-called news, there's a time that comes when many of them, and even newspaper editors and news network executives, they're told, you say what we say to say, and you don't say what we don't say to say. And if you do say what we don't say, tell you to not say, and when you don't say what we tell you to say, you're going to bite the bullet. Now, I don't know what the actual words are, but in so many words, they do tell them that you will bite the bullet if you do not submit. Because the news can be a terrible thing. So, which is why we have independent news sources, and those last however long they last. And there's some who are pretty popular that I think are pretty questionable. But after a while, they either become labeled as rapists, like what's going on with Bill Cosby. You can't be a black conservative. Not somebody as notable with such notoriety as Bill Cosby, a black conservative. No, they cannot tolerate that. So now he is labeled as a rapist of sorts. And possibly they even give you a choice. Okay, sir or ma'am, do you want to be labeled as a rapist, a child molester, or a fraud, or what have you? And they have to choose. Well, if you were given the choice to be labeled as a rapist or a child molester, I would think that you would choose rapists, because it's inevitable that when you cross the line, you're going to be labeled as something. And you could be labeled as dead the next day, like a lot of bankers in the past few years. Top executive bankers, so-called suicides and deaths, and other people of other occupations reporters. So news is a terrible thing, folks.
Melissa, we can now confirm and report that Congressman Steve Scalise is out of surgery. He's in stable condition. We don't know anything else about it. He arrived here by helicopter at MedStar Washington Hospital, one of the larger level 1 trauma units, perhaps brought here because they have a strong orthopedic unit, and he was shot in the hip. But if he was brought here around 8 o'clock, that would have been upwards of 4 to 5, maybe even 6 hours of surgery. But now we know he is out, and he is in good condition, stable condition. We hope to learn more about that. And let me also add, there is...
We hope to learn more about the shooter being a Bernie Sanders 2016 presidential campaign volunteer, but that's kind of asking for a lot. It's interesting that we actually learned that about an hour or an hour and a half ago, before the many news breaks and returns from news breaks that wasn't mentioned a second time yet. And I'm still giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're looking for talking points, but what can they say? What can they say? It's going to take a week for there to be any kind of official acceptance or denial of any political motive and who was behind the political motive. Nobody listens to me anyway, so nothing's going to happen to me. They're not going to come and threaten me. No, but nobody listens to me, so I could pretty much say what I want. But if you've been listening to my podcast, reading my blogs, you'll see that I know that not to cross any kind of a line, because even if you do cross a line, whatever you say isn't really provable. And if we would pray more about the things that we say than say the things we say, much more good will literally be happening. So, another news break. My goodness, Lordy. So many news breaks. So, I am going on 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 4 seconds as I speak on this broadcast, and I want to continue it, folks. It's a blessing that I'm able to actually broadcast for more than 15 minutes, because I took advantage of a $5 deal with Spreaker. And folks, I want to encourage you that everybody has a story, everybody has something to say. Get yourself a podcast. I got it. I increased my subscription with $5 a month for 3 months in a row, so I can have unlimited storage space, and I think it's up to a 5-hour broadcast I'm allowed, but not unlimited. If I go pro, total pro, whatever they call it, I could have non-stop live. Which to me, I don't know. I could do that, but I'd have to have like 3 people involved, that can take over a shift and have their guests talk about the things they want to talk about and make it like a bona fide radio station. This is better than Celestial Radio. Well, this is Celestial Radio. It's by internet, but I'm talking about Sirius and XM radio. That's considered celestial radio because it's satellite, and then AM and FM radio is called terrestrial radio because it's dependent on signals from a physical cell tower on the ground. But folks, I want to encourage you to go do a blog. If you want to talk about sewing or knitting or workplace harmony or whatever, do a blog, and you'll be surprised at what people are interested in. You'll probably find out by accident, and it's like, I wasn't even interested in that, but I had to have something, and all of a sudden it went viral. So I encourage you, especially women. Women are so compassionate and empathetic, full of empathy. And people like listening to a lady's voice about whatever it is, knitting, maybe it's preaching, maybe it's politics. But a lot of women, they don't want to listen to a guy. They just are not in the mood to hear a guy's voice, okay? But they'll listen to a lady's voice, one of their own and one of their owns. So ladies, that's a good reason to be a podcaster. Okay, back to the news.
This morning at a congressional baseball practice, 66-year-old James Hodgkinson of Illinois had volunteered with Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. We have more on that in a moment. But first, Alabama Congressman Gary Palmer describes running for his life.
I was about 20 yards from the shooter. We were taking batting practice. I was the shortstop. Scalise was at second, and Trent Kelly was at third. And I heard a gunshot, and I yelled at Trent. But the gunshot, I think the guy, initial shot, he was trying to hit Trent. He missed it. And Trent yelled, "Shooter."
Mike Tobin is live in Chicago near the shooter's home, and he had a history with police, right?
He did. Hodgkinson was well known to police in St. Clair County, Illinois, just across the river from St. Louis, and that's where his hometown of Belleville, is located. His most recent run-in came in late March of this year when a St. Clair County deputy answered a complaint that someone was off in the trees firing weapons. Hodgkinson did have a valid firearms owner ID card, and the deputy told him there are homes in the area. Essentially, it appears the deputy just told him to knock it off. His most significant run-in with the law came in 2006 when it appears his daughter was staying in a nearby home and refused to leave. According to the report from the St. Clair County Sheriff's Department, Hodgkins went to that home twice. Once he broke the door. The second time he punched a woman in the face, struck a man with the butt of a shotgun, also fired that shotgun. He ended up with 2 counts of battery, domestic battery, aggravated discharge of a firearm. There was also damage to a vehicle charge as well. According to the report, he cut the seatbelt of a vehicle. Online records show the charges in that case were ultimately dismissed. He also faced charges for resisting arrest and drunk driving in separate instances. Melissa.
And what do we know about his political activities?
According to records dug up by the Illinois Policy Institute, he voted Democrat in 2008, 2012, and 2016. Now, his Facebook page is very political. He was a supporter of Senator Bernie Sanders. He helped with campaigns. The page carries a slogan saying, "Democrat socialism explained in 3 words, we the people." He had a lot of anti-Trump messaging on his Facebook page. In March, he posted that Trump is a traitor. Trump destroyed our democracy, and it's time to destroy Trump and company. He included a link to a petition seeking the impeachment of both President Trump and Vice President Pence. Now, he worked as a home inspector. They are overseen by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations. State records show no history of professional problems. He did let his status lapse with that particular department. He was also a member of the American Society of Home Inspectors. No history of trouble there. His membership expired in 2015 when he simply didn't renew and stopped paying his annual fees. Melissa?
Mike Tobin, thank you. The attack against lawmakers prompting a show of unity in the House of Representatives. Members giving a standing ovation to Speaker Paul Ryan when he urged his colleagues to come together. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. And Mike, were these lawmakers targeted because they're Republicans?
Well, Melissa, that's the way it sounds based on the interaction some of the lawmaker players had with the gunman. I asked one of the guys on the field this morning if he believes they were targeted because they are Republicans.
Based on the question he asked me, I would make that assumption because he's asked me if this team was the Republican or Democrat team practicing. I responded that it was a Republican team practicing, and he proceeded to shoot Republicans. You take that for what it's worth.
As the hours have gone by, I'm told a lot of the people who were on the field this morning are pretty shaken up, trying to make sense of what happened and recognizing it could have been them who were severely hurt. Melissa?
Meanwhile, I mean, we have heard that the killer was a volunteer for Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign. How did Sanders react?
Well, Sanders responded quickly, saying first and foremost he hopes that Congressman Scalise, the staffer and former staffer, and the law enforcement professionals all make a quick and speedy recovery. Then Senator Sanders on the Senate floor condemned the violence.
I am sickened by this despicable act, and let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms.
No business in the House today as lawmakers, staffers, and law enforcement professionals all try to make sense of this attack on a charity baseball event practice. Melissa?
Thank you for that report. For more on this, let's bring in Congressman Pete King. He is a Republican from New York who sits on the House Homeland Security and House Intelligence Committee. Sir, thank you for joining us. You know, when you hear all of that talk about the things that the shooter had written and said, all the hatefulness against President Trump, you know, his left-wing ideology, is it fair to connect that to his actions, or was he just a crazy person?
I think he's probably crazy. I mean, it's fair to connect it in the sense that you know, maybe that's what inspired him, but it's not really fair to blame that on Democrats at all. I mean, unfortunately, there's psychotic people on both sides. I do think, though, as the speaker, I think, was saying today on the House floor, it's important for all of us to lower the rhetoric a bit and try to calm things down, because when the rhetoric does get out of control or it gets too loud, you do find psychotic people, mentally disturbed people in society, they can respond to that. And you don't know who it is that's going to respond. So, again, I don't want to in any way blame this on Democrats. And I think Senator Sanders did exactly the right thing by standing up on that Senate floor and, you know, condemning it unequivocally. But again, it should be a signal to people that disruptive behavior and really loud, again, I like a good political fight as much as anyone. There's a certain line you shouldn't cross. And I think when either side does that, it can prompt this type of response.
You know, I wonder, sometimes when you get so locked in battle or so locked in negotiation, you can't give in because of where you come from and how long it's been going on. Does something like this give everyone an opportunity to soften it a little bit and come to the table a little and still save face because you're doing it in the name of sort of calming things down? Or is that naive? What do you think?
No, I don't think it's naive. I think it's an opportunity we should try to take advantage of. I mean, if you can have a horrible incident like this, but if you can take something good out of it, then to me that's, you know, that shows that we're doing our job as members of Congress representing the American people. Because in the end, we represent all the people of America. And you can get caught up, and that's true of both sides. You get caught up in your own internal wars within the party and with the other party, and you just can't bring yourself to compromise. So maybe this will be a way to move us along. Again, there was bipartisan spirit on the House floor today. Hopefully that can continue. I saw this after 9/11. It didn't last as long as it should have. But again, I don't think it's naive. I think it's hopeful. And let's try and get it done.
Certainly people that were there were really shaken and had the opportunity to be leaders. You look at Congressman Rodney Davis, for example. Here's what he had to say about the discourse in politics and some of the rhetoric.
But we all are responsible for the discourse that happens in American government. We have the right to be free in this country. We have the right to elect our leaders, and we have the right to go vote against them if we disagree with their policies. But we've got to ratchet down the rhetoric that we've seen, not only on social media, but in the media, in the 24-hour news cycle. These are the things that have to stop. This is a result, I believe, of political, rhetorical terrorism. That has to stop.
What do you think? Political, rhetorical terrorism? I'm not sure I've heard that before.
Yeah, again, Rodney's a good friend. He's an outstanding member of Congress. I understand what he was saying there. And again, overall, I agree with what he was saying, that it's important to bring the rhetoric down. Again, whether or not that triggered this or not, we have to assume that these can be consequences of what both sides say. And again, I don't want to get drawn into a partisan fight on the day that this occurred. But I would just say all of us, let's all of us get a wake-up call out of this. And again, let me just say, Rodney Davis, I thought he was brilliant on television today. He really showed guts coming right from the field to the TV camera.
I mean, on the flip side, I was talking to former Speaker Gingrich earlier today, and he was making the point that a lot of President Trump's policies really pose an existential threat to some of the ideas on the left and even some of the ideas in the center, and the idea that he's against big government, that he really does threaten their way of life, and that's what's causing sort of some of this panic, that it's real. What do you think of that perspective?
Well, it may, but again, we in a democratic society have the obligations. Ronnie Davis said, you go to the polls to vote somebody out. And perhaps if Bernie Sanders had been elected president, you would have had people on the right reacting in a psychotic way as well. Again, I just say that, obviously Donald Trump is a transformational president, and it is going to maybe set off reactions. But again, I don't want to blame people on the left or left of center for what this person did today. I mean, he was acting on his own. And again, I've been around long enough to know we have these types on both sides.
Yeah, and hopefully, like you said, that the moment will last a little bit longer this time. Thank you so much, Congressman King.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. The armed assault on members of Congress is causing some lawmakers to rethink how they interact with constituents, particularly in town halls back home. My next guest, who has had some contentious town halls, saying today's shooting is really a game changer. Dave Bratt is going to join me next. That and the latest on the investigation. But first, Senator Jeff Flake describes the ordeal.
It looks like only one shooter, you got to assume he knew what he was doing. It seemed like a lot longer, I could tell you, but it was at least 10 minutes. African-American gentleman shot in the leg, and I believe he's the one that brought the shooter down. He ran around for quite a while with a leg wound.
If you're the spouse of a military veteran, I want you to know something. Your spouse has earned the right to apply for a VA home loan. A VA home loan is unique. It's different than other loans because it allows you to borrow up to 100% of the home's value. That extra borrowing power may allow you to pay down debt, lower your monthly payments, put cash in the bank, and give you the peace of mind that every veteran deserves.
Go to newdayusa.com or call 1-855-676-4735. It's a new day for veterans who want to lower their monthly payment.
That's me.
The New Day 100 VA loan lets you refinance your mortgages, consolidate your credit card debt, get cash, and lower your payments an average of $640 a month. New Day will even pay for your appraisal.
That's me.
As a vet, you've earned the right to apply for a home loan that's VA guaranteed. For veterans who want to refinance, that can mean a lot.
That's me.
Call New Day USA now, 1-855-676-4735. Attention, did you have a hernia mash and now have pain or need more surgery? You may be entitled to compensation. If you had a hernia mash and now have pain or infection, mesh failure, or need additional surgery, call now, 1-800-DRUG-HURT. Attention, did your hip implant fail? Did you need surgery to replace your bad hip implant? Call 1-800-DRUG-HURT. Billions have been awarded to defective hip implant victims. You may be entitled to compensation. Call 1-800-DRUG-HURT.
Your brain is an amazing thing. But as you get older, it naturally begins to change, causing a lack of sharpness or even trouble with recall. Thankfully, the breakthrough in Prevagen helps your brain and actually improves memory. The secret is an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, the name to remember.
I had so many reasons for not losing weight, for putting it off. Sound familiar? It's time to take control with Nutrisystem.
Introducing new Lean 13 from Nutrisystem. Lose up to 13 pounds and 7 inches overall in your first month. Lose weight fast, money back, guaranteed.
You gain energy, you improve your health, and you lose weight. I'm Marie and I lost 50 pounds on Nutrisystem.
Order your 28-day plan right now. With Lean 13, you'll get specially designed meals, plus 1 week of new NutriCrush bars to crush cravings free, and 1 week of Turbo Shakes to bust belly bloat free.
Belly fat? Got that under control too.
Call or go online in the next 2 minutes and we'll even throw in FedEx shipping free. Lose up to 13 pounds and 7 inches overall your first month. Millions of people have lost weight on Nutrisystem.
It's time to take control.
Go online or call 888-526-THIN right now and get new Lean 13 with bars and shakes free.
I'm Bill Hemmer on the Fox News deck today. Much more ahead on the gunman who targeted Republican lawmakers at that baseball field outside of Washington. We will speak with 3 lawmakers who were there, including one who says the suspect spoke to him before the shooting began. We will get his story this morning when I host Shepard Smith reporting, coming up in about 17 minutes. Hope to see you at the top of the hour.
He positioned himself in the
visitors' dugout, which is across the field, across the field from where the Capitol Police generally sit. And it's just fortunate because Steve Scalise is a member of leadership. He has a security detail there. Otherwise, we would just be a bunch of guys out on a normal morning practicing. But I think the fact that we practice there every morning, and it's a group of Congress people together, sometimes Joe as many as 25 people, maybe 30.
22 members there today.
You may have been something in which somebody was able to anticipate our being there and being vulnerable.
Congressman Pat Meehan describing the terrifying scene this morning. It is raising new concerns about the safety of politicians in public settings. Our next guest saying the hostile environment could force lawmakers to ramp up security to a new level for large events like town halls. Virginia Congressman Dave Brandt is a Republican on the Budget Committee and a member of the House Freedom Caucus. Sir, I mean, now when you look at those town halls, you kind of look at them through a different lens after what has happened, right?
Yeah, hey, Melissa Francis. Yeah, we already had concerns, and we got great law enforcement at home. Back in my counties, the sheriffs, the police, the first responders do a great job, but this makes you anticipate every event now in a new way. These guys this morning, they're excited, right? I mean, it brings back your youth. You're going to go out and play baseball. Some of the guys are biking there through the neighborhoods alone, and 40 guys getting together at the same time, and that would be a major security event normally, but I think we got a little overexcited and didn't think things through as well as we should.
I guess, but the flip side of that, and I've heard a lot of people say this today, that part of the American tradition is the idea that you guys are walking around, you are going to the supermarket in your district, you are on a bicycle. It makes you accessible to the people that you represent. You're supposed to be among the people you represent. How do you balance that with obviously justifiable security concerns?
Right. Well, no, you got it. That is the flip side. You're right on the money. And so that's the tension. So you just got to be street smart. I mean, we got to be paying attention. And while we're out and about, we need staff with us, have a few eyes on the field, looking down the field, and just anticipating, environments where we're in harm's way, etc. And that's the challenge. And then on the policy front, I taught ethics for 20 years. And so I just challenge everybody today, we need to ramp down the language. It's okay to fight on policy, but the line, right, should be no attacks on personalities going forward. There's no need for that, right? You can always divorce the personality from the policy, just debate policy real hard, but ramp it down on the attacks on the parties and the personalities. Every person has a family back home, as we're tragically learning today, right? I got texts coming in. These guys have families back home, and it's a sad day.
So there is that piece of that is the language, and I think everybody can agree with that. Another side of it, though, is that a lot of the policies that President Trump is talking about really do threaten some different political groups. The idea that he doesn't, he's not going to pay for big government. He wants to shrink the size of government. He wants to drain the swamp. Or he doesn't like policies of the extreme left. And if he really seems to be having success, it is a true and legitimate threat to a group of people. So how do you kind of balance that? Because that's not about fighting language. That's about a real existential threat.
Well, that's right. That's a threat to power of groups up here, but that's the test. The electorate can either decide to be moral moving forward or not, and both sides need to rise up to that standard. So he's free to attack policy. They're free to attack his policy, but they should not be attacking him personally or as a party and raising the verbiage. We've had, articles in Politico this week on using the F-bomb in public by U.S. senators. And you're just like, really? This is a new day. And so the people need to hold us accountable to a certain ethical standard. And we need to put that ethical standard out front and challenge both sides to live up to the same standard, right? And so that's the challenge.
You're talking about that among politicians. You also see, out in the world of art, there's been so much conversation this week about the play here in New York, where they're physically attacking and killing, stabbing someone who looks like the president. Obviously, you have, the issue with Kathy Griffin as well.
Right.
Do you link that too, or is that separate? That's art?
No, that's, the golden rule is about as simple as it gets, right? So you got the Judeo-Christian tradition, Kant and philosophy, right? You can secularize that principle if you want. But would you do that to a friend? No, you wouldn't want anybody doing that to you, so don't do it to them. And this art as a scapegoat is nonsensical. Of course, we want First Amendment protections on that, but within that freedom of language, right, the founders always intended it to be rational political discourse. And so these, it's just everyone wants the 30 seconds of fame right now, and so doing these vulgar things, it does get you money, it gets you fame, but it doesn't get you ethics, and so that's what we got to work on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. You may have really hit on it there in the last. It's about the attention factor in this day and age. That's very true. Congressman Brett, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much.
New information on a shooting at a UPS facility in San Francisco that left multiple people dead. Ahead, why employees say the gunman was no stranger to them.
Hi, so I just got off the phone with our Allstate agent, and I know that we have accident forgiveness. So the incredibly minor accident that I had tonight. 4 weeks without the car.
All right, folks. Sorry about the last news break, commercial break. I wasn't here for. I was actually trying to make me a bowl of cereal. Haven't eaten anything all morning. Well, it's 11:50 now. And thank God I have powdered milk. I had to make some powdered milk for my cereal. Ran out of milk. And I had some frozen blueberries. I mixed in the powdered milk, stirred it up to make it cold. I always have a backup, folks. That's my disaster stuff. Survival. That's my survival stuff. Powdered milk. In a pinch. Anyways, so before this break and after last break, about the 133-minute mark on this podcast, Fox's Mike Tobin, not me, but Fox's Mike Tobin, finally disclosed a political profile on the dead shooter. And then after the 134-minute mark on this podcast, Fox's news lady, I don't even know her name. She's pretty. She's blonde hair. Kind of looks like Megyn Kelly-ish. But she's a little bit more sensible. But after the 134-minute mark, Fox's news lady referred to the shooter as the killer. Huh? Was that a Freudian slip? I don't know. Remember what I said? They had to get new talking points, and the news was already known. This may be a false flag, because now the narrative is that people have to tone down their rhetoric, be it a politician or citizen. And the guy had a reference as political terrorists. So if you dissent, if you are against a policy or a politician, are you a terrorist? Well, come on, I'm not. I know better. But the narrative has been set now, and I agree, we all have to tone down the rhetoric, because as the guy says, that one of the guys being interviewed, we all have families. We go home to families and all, this and that. So here we have it, folks. But anyways, about the 135-minute mark on this podcast, the narrative became clear from politicians and the media. A reference to political terrorism from news sources and politicians. There you have it. That is the new narrative being discussed. Also on Fox, after the 135-minute segment on this podcast, screen captions on Fox began listing the dead shooter's social media rants, numbers of letters sent to politicians, and his political opinions, as well as being an Iowa Sanders 2016 campaign volunteer. So, and right now it's about 11:53, 2:53 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you go to Fox's, if you're recording it, you have access to the broadcast. Just go to the 2:40 p.m. mark, and you'll hear some pertinent information for any reference that you may need. But right now, I take you back to Fox News, and they're talking about the shooting suspect in San Francisco.
Now, officers responded to calls of shots fired at about 9 o'clock this morning. When they arrived, they determined that the shooter was still inside, and they quickly confronted him. That's when they say he put his gun to his head and pulled the trigger. At this time, a motive is not known. So, Melissa, this investigation is really just getting started here. Again, dozens of officers are here. They were also at the hospital where a number of victims were transported, and we're waiting for updates on their condition as well. Back to you.
And what can you tell us about the police response?
Well, there was a large police response. Police officers, firefighters, a number of ambulances were on scene as well, converging on this area and cordoning off this entire neighborhood. A number of streets in this neighborhood are still blocked off. So, and they are still here. You can perhaps see them down my left shoulder behind me. So it's a major investigation, and we're going to keep you posted on what happens next.
Claudia, thank you. We are just getting new video from the time of the shooting at the baseball practice with congressional lawmakers. We'll have that next.
Depression is a tangle of multiple symptoms. That's why there's Trintellix, a prescription medication for depression. Trintellix may help you take a step forward in improving your depression. Tell your healthcare professional right away if your depression worsens or you have unusual changes in mood, behavior, or thoughts of suicide. Antidepressants can increase these in children, teens, and young adults. Do not take with MAOIs. Tell your healthcare professional about your medications, including migraine, psychiatric, and depression medications, to avoid a potentially life-threatening condition. Increased risk of bleeding or bruising may occur, especially if taken with NSAID pain relievers, aspirin, or blood thinners. Manic episodes or vision problems may occur in some people. May cause low sodium levels. The most common side effects were nausea, constipation, and vomiting. Trintellix had no significant impact on weight in clinical trials. Ask your healthcare professional about Trintellix.
You don't let anything keep you sidelined. That's why you drink Ensure with 9 grams of protein and 26 vitamins and minerals. For the strength and energy to get back to doing what you love. Ensure. Always be you.
On April 4th, the world's largest investment bank purchased $300 million of gold for their own account. What do they know that you don't? Investors are snapping up gold. This commodity is on the verge of an epic comeback. Gold and silver, opportunity of a lifetime.
We're seeing a lot of very big, very smart money move into precious metals. They get it. They know what's coming.
Call now and get this exclusive video. See why banks, billionaires, and financial experts are buying gold.
The richest guys who know what they're talking about, like Dalio and those guys, they're shifting into gold now.
Call Lear Capital at 1-800-787-1966 for your free video and special report. Banks, billionaires, and Plan B. See why commentators believe gold is on the verge of an epic comeback and could be an investment opportunity of a lifetime.
Everybody should have gold in their portfolio.
Get your free information and ask how you can get up to $600 in free gold. Call 1-800-787-1966.
Fun and art class. Come close, come close.
When your pain reliever stops working, your whole day stops. For minor arthritis pain, only Aleve can stop pain for up to 12 straight hours with just one pill.
Thank you.
You can't quit. Neither should your pain reliever. Stay all day strong with 12-hour Aleve. Check this Sunday's paper for extra savings on products from Aleve.
The Fox News specialists are firing on all cylinders. Eric Bolin puts politicians on notice with Wake Up America. Ebony K. Williams breaks down legal battles impacting you. And Kat Tipp hits the streets and talks hot topics with the people. Expect the unexpected all this week on the Fox News specialists.
We are getting new sound of dozens of gunshots at the GOP baseball practice just outside our nation's capital. As many as 30 shots can be heard in the recording, which was taken from a house not far from the field where GOP lawmakers and aides were practicing.
Who are they shooting? They're up in the park.
Friday shooting, she asked. Top GOP leader Steve Scalise is currently in critical condition after being shot. He was among a total of 4 who were shot. We're also learning new information about 2 Capitol officers injured in the shooting and are being hailed as heroes. Lawmakers say if not for the presence of Special Agent Crystal Griner and Special Agent David Bailey, the toll could have been much worse when a heavily armed gunman opened fire at a congressional baseball practice in Virginia. Their actions, of course, getting a lot of praise. The 2 officers were treated at a local hospital. They're expected to be okay. Wow. I'm Melissa Francis. For more on all of this, here's Bill Hemmer in for Shep.
Melissa, thank you. Tracking developments certainly in the attack on U.S. lawmakers from earlier today.
I heard a bunch of what appeared to be shots. Pow, 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 pow.
It was at least, they said, about 50 shots.
The officers received fire from the suspect, and they returned fire.
And I heard the police saying to the gunman, I don't know if it's like, get down or put your gun down.
A lot of us dove into the dugout. So the Republican whip, Steve Scalise, several others wounded. The gunman is dead. In a moment, the investigation and the race to figure out a motive this afternoon. You will hear from those who were there during a blood-soaked morning on a baseball diamond in the state of Virginia. I'm Bill Hemmer in today for Shepard Smith. Good afternoon, everyone. Amateur video has captured dramatic audio from the shooting targeting Republican lawmakers practicing for a charity baseball game in Virginia earlier today. What you're about to see is 2 minutes of unedited video of the scene. This is the first time we have seen and heard this angle. Here it is now for the first time.
Shot, is he okay? Is anybody talking to him?
Stay down! Stay down! Stay down!
Photographer there, we assume he lives in the area, says he was walking his dogs this morning. And remember, this all happened a little bit after 7 o'clock this morning. Meanwhile, we're learning the shooter was a Bernie Sanders supporter who repeatedly slammed President Donald Trump and Republicans on social media. That's all according to investigators who found his Facebook page with the suspect's name on it earlier. All of that confirmed. A source also confirming to Fox News that the gunman was James Hodkinson's home inspector, Belleville, Illinois, which is just east of St. Louis, Missouri. President Trump says the suspect died after a shootout with security officers. Witnesses say the suspect asked the lawmakers if they were Republicans or Democrats on the field, then opened fire, spraying the area with bullets for up to 10 minutes in length. Happened this morning at a park in Alexandria, Virginia, 10 miles south of Washington, D.C. Officials say the gunman shot and wounded several people, including Majority Whip Steve Scalise and a Capitol police officer who was part of his security detail. Video shows first responders carrying the Louisiana congressman to an ambulance on a stretcher. Witnesses say those security officers sprang into action, firing on the suspect as people ran for their lives.
I heard a bunch of what appeared to be shots. Pow, 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 pow. Seemed to be like return fire. Pow, 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 pow. I bet you there were 30 to 50 shots that I heard.
That's one witness. Another witness saying that he was across the street at the YMCA when he saw the shootout between the gunman and the security officers with the congressman.
He was crouched behind a wooden structure, exchanging fire with what I believe to be police officers who were hiding behind a black SUV. One was shooting over the engine block. Another was lying down behind the SUV. I believe one of the police officers' rounds passed through the YMCA windows. 2 rounds hit the windows. One went through and landed in the pool. Another lodged between 2 panes of glass.
Republican Senator Rand Paul, he was at the baseball practice telling Fox News earlier live today that the shooting would have been a bloodbath if the security detail had not been there to protect the Majority Leader Whip Steve Scalise, the number 3 House Republican.
One of the staffers quickly climbed in about 2 seconds, climbed the 20-foot fence, hopped down beside me, and we're behind the tree. Still gunshots are, ringing out. Representative Scalise goes down. We can see him, but we can't get to him because really nobody could get to him until the gunman was brought down. There's probably 5 or 10 congressmen hunkering down in the first base dugout. The gunman's in behind the third base dugout. I do believe that without the Capitol Hill Police, it would have been a massacre. We had no defense.
And on it went. Republican Congressman Rodney Davis out of Illinois spoke with me a bit earlier today in America's Newsroom, and he says he was at bat when the shooting began and blamed the violence on the heated rhetoric of America's political climate.
This is what we have to do. We have to bind together as Americans, not as Republicans and Democrats, to come together and say this type of activity cannot and will not stand. We can govern together.
Have you spoken with your family, sir?
I did. I called my wife and my children immediately when I got a hold of a phone because my phone's still hanging in a bag in a crime scene.
What'd you tell him?
I told him I love you. And Dad's okay.
A lot of reaction on that earlier today. President Trump came out about 11:30 Eastern Time, spoke out against the shooting and praised the heroic officers and said Americans are strongest when we are unified.
We may have our differences, but we do well in times like these to remember that everyone who serves in our nation's capital is here because, above all, they love our country.
Former Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders also weighing on this, condemning the shooting. The senator out of Vermont saying the suspect had apparently volunteered for his campaign last year.
I am sickened by this despicable act, and let me be as clear as I can be. Violence of any kind is unacceptable in our society, and I condemn this action in the strongest possible terms.
So we have Team Fox coverage now. We'll speak with lawmakers in a moment here. They were at the practice today, and their first-hand accounts are riveting. Michigan Congressman Jack Bergman, a Republican, retired 3-star Marine Corps Lieutenant General, says he was next in line at bat when the first shot rang out. Then he heard another, and that's when he says he went into Marine mode. The Congressman, Bergman, is with me now, and sir, it's great to see you. What a day it was.
Yes, what a day it has been, and I would just start by saying, please remember and keep those wounded in your thoughts and prayers.
No question. Tell us what you experienced today.
Well, as you said, shot 1, what's that? Shot 2, we're in a firefight. Shot 3. It's in Marine mode, and everybody's scrambling for cover to try to get out of the line of fire. It was evident that the shooter was behind the third base dugout, so we had to get ourselves out of his line of fire. Unfortunately, those who were in third base, shortstop, and second base positions were directly in the line of fire at the beginning. But as he took a pause in his shots, it appears as though he began to move down the baseline, if you will, outside the field, moving towards home plate, which would put those of us who were behind the dugout in a clear line of fire. So once at that point, the Capitol Police were engaging them, and those of us behind the dugout were able to scramble into the dugout until the Capitol Police had taken him down.
Two questions. How many people were on the field around this time? Do you have a number?
There's about 25 people, congressmen and staff and other folks who were there for baseball.
Okay, so what happens then if those officers of that security detail is not present on that field?
Bottom line is, I believe as Senator Paul said in an earlier interview, it would have been a massacre. Well, our only option would have been to defend with baseball bats.
You spoke about an hour ago and said the media is complicit in the unity of America.
Well,
what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that everybody's got a dog in this fight, whether they want to or not. I was an airline pilot before I changed careers in life, and on 9/11, our lives as aircrew changed forever. And I would suggest to you the rest of the world, because of what they did for a living or how they, lived their lives, didn't have to face that new threat like airline crews did. So when we look at the evolving threat to this country, both within and without, nobody can sit at home anymore and just say, well, we'll let the other guys handle it. And what I mean by the media is that it's important to report the news, but we have to be very careful that no matter what the subject is, we don't incite people like the perpetrator today to acts of violence, because we're better than that. And this is an opportunity for us as a country to come together, whether it be the president, the media, the Congress, the general public, to have that discussion as to what we're going to do going forward, because this can't continue.
Just one last point on that. You used the word incite. Is there any evidence that he reacted as a result of the media?
Don't know.
Just when you use the word the media is inciting others, just define that to be clear, sir.
Choose your words carefully when you're reporting news. It was very interesting to stand here on the front end and listen to that tape the first time I'd heard the recording of today's events. That had a profound effect on me.
How come?
Because it did. I was there.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. He's a Marine and a member of Congress, Jack Bergman, the Republican from Michigan. Ahead in a moment, we'll go live to the hospital for an update on the survivors of today's attack and how Steve Scalise is doing at this hour. Also today, we'll bring you new details on the shooter from our Chief Intelligence Correspondent, Catherine Herridge, who always chooses her words with care. She's next.
Long live honor, and long live the truck that salutes those who built this country. Ram, America's longest lasting pickups.
Now get an average $11,468 in total value towards 0% financing on the 2017 Ram 1500 Bighorn Crew Cab.
I would like to take a moment to address my fellow veterans, because I know there are so many of you who have served your country honorably, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, or 32 years like myself. One of the benefits that we as a country give you as a veteran is your eligibility for a VA loan. Not 80%, but 100% the value of your home, and that's what you can get at New Day USA.
Go to newdayusa.com or call 1-855-707-5775. It's a new day for veterans who want to refinance.
That's me.
The New Day 100 VA loan lets you refinance your mortgages, consolidate your credit card debt, get cash, and lower your payments an average of $640 a month. New Day will even pay for your appraisal. That's me. As a vet, you've earned the right to apply for a home loan that's VA guaranteed. For veterans who want to refinance, that can mean a lot. That's me. Call New Day USA now, 1-855-707-5775.
Attention mesothelioma victims. You are entitled to financial compensation from the $30 billion Asbestos Trust Fund. Mesothelioma is a rare cancer caused by exposure to asbestos. Exposure to asbestos occurred in shipyards, the Navy, power plants, and all other trades. Decades later, you are paying the price. Don't let them get away with intentionally exposing you to harm. Mesothelioma patients, time is limited. Call 1-800-875-3000 now for a free consultation. That's 1-800-875-3000.
Your eyes have a protective lipid layer that can break down and cause dry eyes. Soothe XP from Bausch & Lomb helps restore this layer, seal in moisture, and protect against further irritation.
All right, you guys. The last notable thing said on this news hour with Fox at about 12 minutes after 3 p.m., I now have the guy's name, Congressman Jack Berg from Michigan, freshman congressman, again cautions media to use caution on their words while reporting news so as not to incite violence. And on that, I am going to end this podcast. So please, Lord, I just pray for this country right now. I pray for all of its citizens, refugees, immigrants, illegal aliens. God, I just pray for us all, and I pray that justice will continue to be served, and that we as a nation will submit to your will and your way, God, that we'll submit to righteousness, to justice, to harmony, to be at peace with one another, God. And thank you, Lord, for Representative Berg from Michigan with his words of caution to news on how they report it, God. In defense of Fox News, I wouldn't necessarily hold them to that type of a caution totally, but even partially, God, is enough. And I pray for the other networks, God, that somehow that you'll just shut the mouths of the evil and the wicked, and that people on mainstream and private news sources will not just use caution, but they will report facts, report events, and nothing more, nothing less. We can voice our opinions, but to voice it with animosity only breeds animosity, God. So cause us to learn, Lord. And thank you, God, that Representative Scalise is going to recover, and that all the other victims are going to recover, God. In Jesus' name, thank you, Lord. Amen. That is all.